Thanks everyone. Welcome everybody. Those in the gallery, I'd also like to welcome our viewers at home who are watching the meeting via the live stream. If I could ask you please, if you could be upstanding, and Deputy Mayor Migdale, if you could please read the opening prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions, to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask all of this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Councillor Hatton, could you read the acknowledgement of country?
On behalf of councillors, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and show our respect for elders, past, present and emerging.
Thank you. You can take your seats. Without prior approval, any recording of this meeting is prohibited. No action should be taken on any resolution of council prior to written advice from the city being received. That brings us to item 1, official opening, and I declare the meeting of 10th of June 2025 open at 6:33 p.m. Item 2, apologies. I do have an apology tonight from Councillor Andrea Criado. Approved leaves, I have nil. Item 4, disclosure of interest. There were several disclosures of interest from the Planning and Development Committee last week. These are displayed behind me from Councillor Hatton, Dudek, another one from Councillor Hatton, Councillor Olo and Councillor Papard. Also from Councillor Perkoff and Councillor Criado. Councillors, are there any other disclosures for this evening? Not at this stage. Let's keep an eye on it through the night. Thanks. Item 5, petitions. Councillors, are there any unverified petitions for this evening to be presented? No petitions. Responses from previous questions from members of the public taken on notice. I have nil. Brings us to item 7, public question time. We have got a few questions tonight, so we'll get underway with those. I do note, even in the previous, the ones that have been sent in, there are quite a few that are very similar. So if I could just ask, in the interest of keeping the meeting flowing, if you do hear a question that is very similar to yours, either ask a different question or please refrain from repeating it. That would be great. William Bingley, if you'd like to start us off. Thank you. And if you can just press the button on the bottom right hand, the silver button on the microphone there, up the top. Yep, that's it. And that doesn't have to be touched again. Start with your name and your suburb and then your question, please.
William Bingley, Dianella. Hello, councillors. Mr. Mayor, I will forewarn you that my 2 questions cover different topics. Firstly, will the City of Stirling consider enforcing speed limits in regard to e-bikes within city parks, such as installing signage and painting speed limits on footpaths?
Thank you for that. Look, we do consider quite regularly those exact things, and there are instances where there are extra signage and paintings. Obviously, the e-scooters or any e-ridables have been in the media a fair bit in the last week particularly. We maintain that the state government has full regulation of speed limits and policing of those, but we are seeking more guidance on what further regulations they will be putting in place, and then obviously our monitoring of how we monitor the hireable e-ridables throughout specific precincts in the city and whether they need further modifications.
Okay, cool. And my second question is, with the high cost of living and limited pensions that impact our senior citizens, will the City of Stirling consider expanding senior services to include the implementation of carers employed by the local government that could assist elderly residents facing issues with daily tasks?
Thank you for that question. Look, it is quite complicated. The city has recently, in the last few years, exited some of those higher care areas through the aged care process, because there are obviously many agencies that do that through a prescribed process to receive federal funding. What the city has concentrated on through that process is our care finder, which is ensuring that we understand the needs of our senior citizens in the community and assisting them to find those care and connecting them with the right services. We do, however, still operate many of those services, including taking people to shops or to the libraries. We have our day clubs as well for seniors operating, and we have our Meals on Wheels services as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Elliott. Thanks, Mr. Elliott. Just your name and suburb to start, and away you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Richard Elliott, and I live in Trigg. My question is, I refer to the Planning and Development Regulations 2015, which contain guidance on local planning scheme provisions. I acknowledge that under clause 61.3 of the regulations, a restaurant cafe in a centre zone is exempt from development approval if classified as a D use. I ask, is it true that the regulations do not contain any deemed provisions which limit the city from making a restaurant cafe an A use in a local centre zone?
Thank you for that question. I'll go to Mr. Lafort.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Elliott, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it is understood that the regulations don't contain any specific provisions that limit the city from making a restaurant or cafe an A use in the local centre zone. And despite the fact that it is currently a P use as well in the current scheme.
My second question is, does the city acknowledge that the centre zone objectives stated under the regulations are not relevant to a small local centre zone, as they refer to detailed planning being in accordance with the structure planning provisions of a local scheme or the SPP 4.2, provisions which typically apply to larger centres?
Thank you. Mr. Lafort.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the city is aware of this. The centre zone and the local centre zones are different zones and they've got different objectives. So consistent with State Planning Policy 4.2, draft LPS 4 proposes a local centre zone for the city's local centres, and a neighbourhood centre zone for the city's neighbourhood centres, and also a centre zone for the district centres and above.
My third question is, does the city acknowledge that there is no state planning, there's no government planning regulation or policy that would limit the council in immediately modifying LPS 4 to classify a restaurant cafe as an A use in the local centre zone?
Mr. Lafort.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the city does acknowledge that there's no state government planning regulation that would prevent the council from recommending to the WAPC that under LPS 4, a restaurant or cafe be classified as an A use in the local centre zone. However, it should be noted that making this change now would require draft LPS 4 to be re-advertised, potentially delaying progression of LPS 4 by approximately 12 months by the time re-advertising occurs. So that would also make development of a restaurant cafe zone more onerous than it is already under the current planning scheme, where it's currently permitted use, as I said previously, in the local centre zone, where planning approval is only required for external works for a restaurant or cafe in the local centre zone.
Can I ask a supplementary question?
You can't, but I think you can pass it maybe to one of your colleagues because you've got quite a few coming up.
Thank you.
And they might be able to reword theirs into your supplementary. Peter Benjamin. I hope I pronounced that right.
Close. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I'm Peter Bingaman and I live in Trigg. My first question is, in the attachment 4 of the report of draft LPS 4, the city has dismissed submissions made by various members of the Too Big for Trigg group who have requested that a restaurant stroke cafe should be changed from P to A in the local centre zone. This is partially on the prefix that such use is desired land use under State Planning Policy 4.2. I ask, is it true that the desired land uses for a local centre under SPP 4.2 may be classified as an A under the local planning scheme?
Mr. Lafort.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the city could seek to classify those desired uses for local centres as A uses under draft LPS 4, and that's the case with the liquor store small and small bar. However, I guess the implications of making those changes at this stage, contrary to what was advertised, obviously it would introduce a mandatory advertising process for a restaurant or cafe in all local centres across the city, of which there are almost 50. which is considered onerous. It would require LPS 4 to be re-advertised, as I mentioned before, which is likely to delay the whole of LPS 4 by approximately 12 months and add significant costs to the project. Also, for example, re-advertising of people around centres would require up to and around 22,000 letters to be resent out to people advertising this change. And there'd also be additional costs and red tape for those undertaking development of these uses, and additional costs to the city for undertaking assessment of these type of uses. So I think, obviously, looking at this, looking at on a citywide basis, there are a lot of implications of having this this change at this point in time.
Can I help you out, sir? Because it follows on from, might be help with a supplementary one from the first question. Just to seek some further clarification from the director, I understand the responses, but listening to the people, and I can see there's a list of them coming through with similar themes. If we've advertised LPS 4 and there's community interest in changing LPS 4, but the reason we can't do anything is because we'd have to re-advertise it, then what's the point in advertising it and asking for submissions in the first place? Through the director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct to an extent. However, if we receive a submission that is related to an individual's property that they own themselves, and that change is requested that is considered sort of more minor and won't have an impact on its neighbours, then certainly those changes can easily be made without re-advertising. However, the nature of these changes, we have just under 50 local centres across the city. They all have individual landowners and tenants in there. They would all need to be consulted for something like this. And we also do a 200-metre radius for sort of consultations like this. This would be a significant change. Council can, of course, make that decision to do so, but it would require re-advertising.
Thank you. Keep going, sir.
My second question. Is it true that a number of desired land uses for a local centre under SPP 4.2, namely a small bar and a liquor store, are classified as an A under the draft LPS 4?
Mr. Lafort.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. My final question. Why has a restaurant stroke cafe not been classified as an A use when such use poses potential impacts upon a local community equal to or greater than a small bar or a liquor store?
Thank you. Mr. Lafort.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it has been treated differently, and it's been treated the same way that is in the current scheme, where the use is permitted. So there's no change proposed. It's not the city's view that the use is particularly problematic. So it is treating it differently to those other uses for the reasons already given of why it is being treated like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne Blakeney, please.
Mayor and councillors and all in attendance. Wayne Blakeney from Benyon Street, Trigg. I guess I'll try and reshape some of these in light of what the responses have been to date, but there was obviously an acknowledgement that the proposed restaurant that was submitted some 5 years ago on the yellow site and that was rejected by the city and the JDAP on 2 different occasions saw the rezoning to a office block, an office use, rather than a cafe in response to the community's grave concerns at traffic and other impact on our local community amenity. Given that, does the city acknowledge that the case of the refusal of the Trigg Local Centre redevelopment is recognition that the community should rightly have a say in the outcome of a restaurant cafe in a local centre zone?
I'll get some clarification on this. I don't know. I don't know if it was rejected because of a cafe there. I think that was withdrawn as part of the approval to get the approval through, though. But Mr. Lafort, if you can. Oh, Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in relation to the land use on that particular site, look, every development application is assessed individually on its merits and on the planning framework of the day. I do understand that the initial refusal back in March of 2021 didn't specify the restaurant use explicitly as one of the refusal reasons, but there were a number of refusal reasons that were linked to accumulative factors of the mixed use development. I hope that sort of addresses your question. The consultation process that happens in development applications, such as those, afford an opportunity for residents to provide commentary on land use appropriateness.
I understand, and it was the parking that was the issue at the time, when there was going to be 6 or 7 bays as opposed to now there'll be 0 or 1 at best. So my third question then, I guess, is why is the city seeking to deny the opportunity for the community adjacent to a local centre to raise these concerns now? And if we're not going to be given that opportunity, in previous discussions with the Mayor, that it's a directive from the government, can council see another alternate way that this problem can be approached so that the community can have some sort of impact when there's obviously going to be an adverse impact on the local community? And that parking problem won't go away, it's still there. So all of the reasons why the development was rejected originally are still there. And yet with a stroke of a pen, change of use, the community is going to have seriously adversely affected.
Thank you for that question. Look, the short answer is that council hasn't made a determination yet, and obviously council will determine this item tonight and may indeed decide to do something. But I will get Ms Shears just to provide maybe some clear pathways on avenues that council could take.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you, Mr Blakeney, for your question. The complexity that we face is we have a suite of zones that are applicable across the state. So our local zones, that we have for local centres and the way we treat them aren't just applicable to that particular site. They're across all sites like that in the city. So as I mentioned earlier, we have almost 50 local centres. So any change we make to such, from a P to an A use, so for a restaurant or cafe, that will apply across every single centre in the city. We did, through LPS 4, when we first initiated it, we did seek to have a slightly nuanced or different outcome for local centres. That was rejected by the Minister, and the Minister instructed us to remove that prior to advertising. So we are aware of that as an issue and are looking to, I guess, look for other options to try and get that nuanced opportunity. We certainly do take on board the comments we received during consultation for LPS 4, and this is the appropriate time to raise these issues with the city. There is still the opportunity, if we get new DAs that involve building work, the community will absolutely be involved in notification for that. It's really only where there's an existing building and that use changes, like the example you have provided, where that is a P to a P use and that doesn't involve advertising.
Thank you.
Roy Burton. Again, just your name and suburb to start. And just before you do start, sorry, we have completed the first 15 minutes, so I do rule to extend question time for a further 30 minutes to allow more questions at this stage. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Roy Burton, Trigg. I cite the case of the Trigg Local Centre site where the developer only obtained development approval from JDAP once the ground floor use was changed from cafe to an office, thus alleviating many of the local area impacts. I ask, does the city acknowledge that uses classified P in the local centre zone are typically approved as of right and as such warrant less scrutiny than a use classified as A?
Yes. That's correct.
That's the short answer.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. Does the city consider that it is a reasonable imposition on a local community to classify a restaurant cafe as a use permitted as of right, i.e. a P use, considering that it may be a licensed premises, have evening trading hours, have food prepared on site, and like the local Trig Centre proposal, have adverse impacts on the locality in terms of car parking, traffic management and noise issues?
Thank you. I'll get Mr. Lafort probably to clarify also some of those development application requirements that we'll still have to go through.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, yeah, the city does think it's reasonable to expect a cafe or restaurant should be a permitted use in a local centre, which is the current case under the current planning scheme. A lot of local centres, we do want the amenity, we do want activation, we do want people to use them, and having these type of uses does encourage people to use the centres and for them to remain active. But if the cafe or restaurant does include an external works component, it will still need to satisfy the relevant planning framework. So you would still need to see a planning application. And likewise, if there's a liquor component to it, there's also would have to go through the liquor licensing process. So there is obviously something in place that would look at that liquor component. And the restaurant and cafe would still need to comply with relevant building and health standards that are applicable to the premises, trading hours, noise, to ensure that that the proposal wouldn't have an adverse impact on the surrounding area.
My third question, what assurances can the city give a local community that a PUs in a local centre zone would be thoroughly scrutinised so as to protect the amenity of the local area in the absence of allowing the community to comment on the proposal?
Thank you. I'll just get Mr. Lafort maybe to elaborate a bit more on that last one, and maybe even parking controls and those sort of things.
Thank you for that, through you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, as I said previously, anything with external works would still need that planning application. But the reason, obviously, the state government in 2021 did modify the legislation to allow uses that are permitted to change to other permitted uses, and that was to make it a little bit easier for these businesses to operate. And that was obviously done on purpose. So consistent with our current framework, but there are still going to be requirements under the development approval if there are external works to assess those things, including parking requirements, and as I said, noise and other building standards still apply. So there is still going to be a level of scrutiny that's going to go with that. If there's a compliance issue, they still need to comply with the requirements. So even if it's a permitted use, but we find that there's an issue, there's still a compliance process that the city would have to go through, the same as any other development.
Okay. Thank you.
Miles Harmer, here's a name we haven't seen for a little while. Welcome back.
Thank you. My questions are not about Yellow Cafe. On behalf of the Mountain Lawley Society, I'd like to thank the councillors of the city in advance for AIM-K, including it into the city's LSP for draft.
And just your name
The
and
question.
suburb.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Miles Harmer, Mountain Lawley.
Thank you.
Okay. My question's a long one. I'll break it into three parts. My question concerns the proposed development 872 Beaufort Street, which is within a designated heritage area. Are councillors in the city aware that the advertised material on the board and on the website does not mention the heritage area, and that the important links do not include a link to the Character Retention Guidelines Inglewood, which is the policy associated with this heritage area?
Thank you. Mr. Fletcher?
Should I stop there or keep going?
We'll get a response to that first one. And then,
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, the city is aware that the material is not on the department's webpage. I actually spoke, excuse me, with officers at the department just this afternoon, just confirming some requirements. They post important documents such as the local planning scheme, which references the heritage special control area, but they did confirm for me that despite not having all of the documents available on their website, they must still give due regard to all of the city's local planning framework, when they considered the application.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question really is there that the general public don't know in the advertising about the existence of the character retention guidelines. So it should really be there, shouldn't it? Yeah, okay, we agreed on that. Okay. Including this policy is, are you aware that including this policy is very important because it prevails over other policies, including all the other you mentioned, except the Beaufort Street LDP. And the objectives of this policy state that the purpose of the policy is to ensure that the heritage character of Inglewood is retained and protected, as well as being reflected in new developments, and that new buildings, including additions where they occur, should be designed to fit into the existing streetscape and be designed in a similar style, scale, and proportions as the existing buildings. Are you aware of that?
Yes, Mr.
Yes.
Fletcher.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Just checking. But the general public aren't, because it's not in the adverts. It's not in the advertised material. Are you aware that the style, scale, and proportions of the existing heritage buildings, which I've just mentioned, are analysed in Part 5 of the policy and show that the heritage commercial and mixed-use buildings are predominantly one story, with two prominent two-story buildings, the Civic Theatre and the Civic Hotel. Low stuff. To this day, there are no buildings of more than 3 stories on Beaufort Street in either Mount Lawley and Menora or in Inglewood heritage areas. Since this policy, which they've left out, is so vital to processing this development application, can the City ask the Department of Planning, Land and Heritage to re-advertise this development to prominently include the information that it is in a heritage area and to provide a link to the policy associated with that area, which is the Character Retention Guidelines Inglewood, which, as I say, prevail over all other policies except the Beaufort Street LDP.
And thank you for that question. Look, and again, I'll go to Mr. Fletcher, but I think it's important to note that obviously these can still be addressed through the submissions directly to DPLH, but also whilst it may be left out of the advertising, it's certainly not left out of the city's assessments in terms of how they'll assess this particular application. Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the Mayor is completely correct. I appreciate your point that it might not be visible to the public on the department's page. As I mentioned, I did discuss this with department officers this afternoon. I can see what they can do about that, but it is largely outside of the city's control for what they put on their website. But yes, I definitely appreciate your point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Messina Robinson. Let's go back to the coast.
Yep. Messina Robinson, from a long-term resident of Trigg, very close to the redevelopment that's occurred at the previous yellow site, and also I was a town planner for a very long term. So my question has been answered, particularly relating to the 2019 Action Plan for Planning Reform, which the advice that we'd received in writing in an email was that that under Initiative C1, all local planning schemes should classify restaurant cafe as a P use. That's not actually, as you had admitted, it's not correct. It wasn't to be applied across the board, and it was really just making general statements about consistency of town planning schemes, which the state government is trying to do. And they're certainly not trying to be prescriptive about saying every single local centre should have a cafe and restaurant as a permissible use. It needs to go through a thorough assessment. And that was a 2019 document that you're referring to. In 2023, July 2023, SPP 4.2 Activity Centres policy states that local centres, local activity centres, decision makers should not support planning instruments and development applications that are likely to unreasonably affect the amenity of the locality through the traffic or other impacts. So clearly it was established when the previous development application was assessed that there was major traffic impacts and there were studies done, and the developers ended up changing the proposal to downgrade and not generate as much traffic by not allowing a restaurant cafe use. And now they're trying to slip this through as a change by having a sort of blanket approach. So I'm really pleading that consideration be given to all the submissions that have been made in response to advertising. You're saying you're not prepared to re-advertise, but clearly you've advertised, and there's been a great deal of objection to having a local centre developed with a restaurant cafe on this site, which is significantly smaller than all other local centre sites in the city, and needs to be given an individual consideration, and whether that be through some other way, like even just slightly changing the zone of this particular site, or looking at other measures anyway through discussion with the local community, I think needs to be given some consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. And look, and I can only confirm, council hasn't deliberated on this tonight, so they certainly haven't decided that it shouldn't be re-advertised yet. I know that the officer's advice is that, but there is hope. Michael Lawson. Thank you. Your name and suburb.
Thank you, Michael Lawson from Trig. I will rephrase my questions, and I'll put it to you, Mr. Mayor, that if there is objection, why would we not go into a re-advertising process? So I'll put that to the council. Why wouldn't that be done if there's significant objection from the community?
Thank you. And look, council will weigh up, obviously, the information you've provided tonight as a group, and council will determine if it should be re-advertised with those changes or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Robert Mitchell. Thank you. Just name and suburb.
Good evening, Mayor. Robert Mitchell, Karrinyup. Councillors, council officers, fellow people in the gallery. I have two questions tonight, and my first is in relation to the Karrinyup West Village construction. That's some time ago I was informed that the council officers were investigating parking for contractors and building staff when the West Village apartment construction starts. Below a mention I put at the annual electors meeting, I would like to know, as would a lot of other Karrinyup residents, whether such has been bedded down to avoid the chaos of the East Apartments parking at the start of construction. We all know the chaos there. I believe the construction starting in September, or probably when the trees in Burrows Road are cut down. Have officers completed their investigation to house these contractors' vehicles? Has the builder indicated when they are to construct each block of apartments separately or all together?
Thank you. Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Thank you for your question, Mr. Mitchell. So at the moment, the city does not have a building permit for the towers. Part of the permit process, the builder will need to provide a construction management plan. The construction management plan will detail staging and car parking requirements for contractors and attendees on site.
You're intending to use the primary school?
No,
Karrinyup for parking?
There's no plans at the moment, Mr. Mitchell.
No? Okay. Right, well, my next question relates to the community access and activities. at the what's happened in relation to that. Mayor, I congratulate you and all the City of Stirling for staging the charity showdown event at Scarborough Beach. It does broadcast to all the necessary to exercise the body on show were good examples. I would like yourself and the council to consider staging or allowing board games like chess, drafts, dominoes, playing relaxed in public places or competitive organised modes. Exercising that thing we all have on our shoulders. There are many places in the City of Stirling board games could be conducted. That, Mayor, would include your favourite place, Scarborough Beach, but hopefully not on the boardwalk.
Hey,
Now, my third question relates
thanks, Mr. Mitchell.
to...
We'll consider it.
My third question relates to the boardwalk itself. And I have an important question about the construction built form of this proposed boardwalk between Scarborough and Trigg. Have you, the Mayor and the Council, driving this proposal, been advised as to the materials that built form is allowed to be constructed on an A-class reserve?
No,
You haven't been.
no, not at this stage.
So you've no idea of what the construction would be or should be, given the Department of Environment have got a very serious overlook of this whole concept.
That is forming part of the body of works that is currently underway and will be presented to the community.
Okay, I find it strange that that's not known, because
If I knew it, you would know it, Mr. Mitchell.
I dealt with a matter with them at Hyden in relation to high tension power poles. We wanted to put concrete ones in, but they told us we had to use timber.
Yeah.
And that's on an A-class reserve, so...
No, I agree.
know how you'll
I certainly agree with you. That's a body of work that's currently being done. But once we know, and the work is being done with those agencies as well, then you will also know. It will be out to public.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Bond.
Margaret Bond, Scarborough. Mr Mayor, councillors. There have been many confusing answers provided by the Mayor to questions regarding his promotion of a multi-million-dollar kilometre-long coastal boardwalk from the northern car park at Scarborough Beach to the southern car park at Trigg Beach through the highly protected and valued coastal dune system that is South Trigg Beach Class A Reserve. I am seeking clarification of whether the proposed boardwalk would be for pedestrian only and whether this means the existing dual path would be restricted to bicycles, scooters, skateboards, etc. I note that the Katera report refers to the existing path as a future bike path. If this is the intention, how does the city propose pedestrians would be prevented from using this shorter and more convenient path between Scarborough and Trigg?
I don't think there's any indication that there'll be restrictions of people walking on the path along the side of the road if they wish to.
Right, okay. The Council of Stirling has allocated $500,000 for the Coastal Boardwalk feasibility study. This proposed boardwalk will require state and or federal funding. The present Labor government has not factored this project cost into the next 4 years' expenditure. The City of Stirling is wasting ratepayers' money on a feasibility study for a project that may not be constructed, considering the designated Class A reserve and lack of funding. Mr Mayor, at every meeting you push back on questions regarding a Plan B, widening the existing path. My question, why is a costing for widening the 600-metre long dual path not considered or costed, as the proposed boardwalk may never be built?
Thank you. And look, there's a lot of questions there. I don't think I've pushed back on any questions. I just try to give the straight facts. This council asked the officers to investigate a boardwalk. Where that boardwalk is, whether it's close to the path or in the middle of the sand dunes or on the beach, has yet to be determined.
Okay, my third question. I understand that Katerra Environment has been engaged to make presentations promoting the coastal boardwalk to city staff and the Community Coastal Advisory Group. Why is this happening prior to the period of public consultation when there are no designs available, no route for the boardwalk has been decided, no consultation with local First Nations people has been undertaken, and no independent environmental impact study has been carried out? What is Katerra being paid for this work? Is the presentation material available for scrutiny by stakeholders such as Bush Not Boardwalk or Friends of Trigg Beach?
Thank you. That is not the case. Katerra have been engaged by the city through a tender process to provide those initial stages of the environmental investigations. And many of those different pieces of work include many different government organisations, and we have had Aboriginal elders included in those conversations. There's no secret promotional work by Katerra going on anywhere.
So is there material available for, the stakeholders to source, find some answers?
The public information will be provided when it goes out for advertising with all of that information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Masielli. Just name and suburb, thanks.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors, Executive Team and Public Gallery. My name is Mike Masiello from Trigg. Despite the significant appetite for alternative options to a boardwalk through the dunes, on May 27, 2025, the Mayor stated, "Currently, widening the footpath isn't one of the options that will be considered with the community." Essentially, this suggests the Mayor and city officers plan on dictating a closed loop of options that elected members will be voting on, and the ratepayers will be consulted on, despite the city being aware of the significant support for alternatives to a boardwalk through the dunes. Forcing the city's preferred option will reduce the credibility and potentially invalidate the community consultation and any elected member vote. This closed loop approach goes against relevant local government legislation, including specific requirements for financial management and community engagement. This approach is particularly questionable when there's a lack of prescriptive councillor endorsement or resolution that specifically calls upon the city to investigate a boardwalk through the dunes. My question, can the Mayor please justify to ratepayers and elected members why the city officers are choosing not to seek feedback on viable alternative locations for a boardwalk, including an upgraded walkway/boardwalk on the edge of the reserve next to the current path during the community consultation and for any future elected member vote?
Thank you for that. And again, there's a lot in there. I think I've been fairly clear that the city's direction to officers wasn't to investigate widening a concrete pathway. It was to provide an iconic way for people to get from Scarborough to Trigg, provide an experience, provide some connectivity. Where that boardwalk is, it may well be through these initial investigations, they say you should build it right next to the existing pathway. They may not. That will form part of the information that comes back to council, and then it will be fed out to the public for public to make a decision on.
But last week you said currently widening the footpath isn't one of the options that will be consulted on with the community. Do you forget saying that?
No, I think you're taking it out of context. I'm pretty sure you were asking about multi-criteria assessments. And
No.
I said there weren't several assessments.
It wasn't me that asked the question, it was Brett Russell. So I can send you the link, the recording if you like.
That'd be great, Mr. Massey.
Fantastic, thank you. So we've audited the history behind the current iteration through reviewing minutes and liaising with governance and have confirmed the following. There was a motion on the 5th of the 12th, 23 by Councillor Papard to facilitate an elected members workshop. An elected members workshop occurred in March 2024, facilitated by city officers. However, the City of Stirling governance has refused to disclose who attended that workshop or what was discussed. Governance manager has confirmed elected members did not prescribe a specific methodology to conduct the feasibility study. $500,000 was allocated through the corporate business plan to explore the feasibility of establishing a coastal boardwalk between Trigg and Scarborough Beach involving community engagement. In summary, there's no record of a motion or resolution of elected members to call upon the city to specifically investigate a boardwalk through the dunes, as you have stated several times. Why has the Mayor consistently stated on the record that the councillors have instructed the city officers to only investigate the specific option of a boardwalk through the dunes when City cannot provide ratepayers any evidence to support this statement?
I'm not making stuff up, Mr Masiello. The council endorsed here through a budget process. Workshops happen consistently with this council. In fact, many times a week. Council last night, they were here till 9 o'clock again with workshops. Most of that information includes many presenters. They're not open to the public.
I'm referring to the
Council.
repeatedly stating that
Just a
the
question,
council
Mr.
called
Masiello.
upon you to investigate the boardwalk through the dunes is the point I'm making. There was never a motion or resolution
up for
to
debate, Mr.
investigate
Masiello. Have you got
a
a third
boardwalk
question?
through the dunes. Governance Manager, third question, has stated in an email, the city is looking at options for the location of the boardwalk during the feasibility study. These options will be assessed against the key principles of the project, which are to enhance connectivity, improve pedestrian safety, create an iconic experience, and minimise impact to the natural environment. My question, who developed these key principles? How were they developed? And how will the proposed boardwalk location options be against these principles, assessed against these principles?
Thank you. And most of those principles were discussed with councillors, which is why the project was developed. And they've been further informed by various feedback from stakeholder groups and some of that early consultation.
So who developed the key principles? That's what I asked.
I've just answered that. Thank you, Mr Masiello.
I look forward to the detail in writing. Thank you, Mayor.
Kieran Kelly.
Kieran Kelly, Scarborough. At a previous meeting, a couple of meetings ago, I asked about the irrigation problem over here at Civic Gardens and was informed of an old E. coli problem with the irrigation in the water source for the irrigation. Also, that trees would be hand watered whilst the irrigation system is down. On a further visit, I now notice that the signage has been installed advising of shot hole borer infecting a number of trees in the area. Couple of quick questions here. Has the E. coli problem been solved?
The water source using the E. coli has been turned off, Mr Murphy.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Kelly. Through you, Mr Mayor. That's correct. So E. coli was discovered in the water supply, which was switched off, which is the reason why it's not been irrigated. We found an alternative source that doesn't contain E. coli, so we're just working on that connection. It's been actually problematic to connect, but we will get that sorted before next summer.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to follow my own notes. Are the council actually at the moment undertaking that tank watering to the trees as was stated?
Mr Murphy.
Through you, Mr Mayor. I need to check exactly which trees are being watered. I know we've been hand watering some of the areas and we're keeping a close eye on the trees and the shrubs. Particularly now that the rains have come, we'll see. We've noticed that some of those trees have been under stress, so we'll keep a close eye on them to see how they recover as we go into the warmer period. But thankfully, the rain has come.
Right. The shot hole borer, the trees that the signage is saying up there. Will the council be looking at DPERB's method of removing the trees, or will you be looking at the latest technique of injection to try to save these trees?
Thank you. Mr Murphy?
Through you, Mr Mayor. I'm not sure what we're going to do with specific trees, but I can certainly take that offline and find out. I'm not aware that the method you talked about has not been successful as far as I'm aware, but I can look into that, and as I said, we can talk offline.
And do you know offhand?
I'll just get Mr Roddick to add.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mr Kelly, thanks for the question. Look, I'm part of a CEO roundtable with Walgo with 8 councils which are impacted by the the polyphagous shot-hole borer. As part of that process, I'll make sure that the city is still and look at all options available, and we will look at the trial what happened out at Canning, what you were just about talking about then, and other moves in that space. But we are focused on making sure that we deal with the issue as best we can. At the same time, we're also engaging with state government and federal government through WOGA in terms of looking how do we, pay for some of this remediation and containment if we can.
And just offhand, do you know how many trees over there have been infected, or?
Not off the top of my head, but I can give you those details.
And do the council have their own trained staff to look at that, or are we just relying on the DPERB staff?
There's about 8 questions here, Mr. Kelly.
Oh, and that's only my first question, too.
Okay. We'll respond to you in writing.
Okay.
But we'll get the list of questions off you.
My second question now, because they're only just, is...
Can I just say that, can I ask respectfully, I have to extend it again in a second. I'm only going to extend it for another 10 because it will take us to 7:30. There's still about 4 or 5 left, so I need you all to be succinct and
these are very quick now.
Yes.
I noticed at the front that in the forecourt where the new landscaping is going, not much progress in the last month, but still I know things take time. Is there a plan on any of the websites? I tried looking for one that may show the ratepayers actually what's going out there in front, and what is the expected budget for that project?
Thank you. The budget is set. The works have been slow, mostly because of noise mitigation. Some of it's been trying to mitigate so business can still go ahead with some fairly heavy concrete cutting. I'm not sure about the plans on the website.
I couldn't find one, but
we'll follow up for that and provide you a response, and if not, we can get the plans up there.
Okay. And then the last one, very quick one: is there a master plan or any idea of what may happen between the council offices here and the freeway for this sort of hub that's going to be happening? Or, do you think it will be a master plan, and when we might see something?
There's a previous master plan in terms of the planning framework, but there's certainly not that master plan that I think you're seeking at this stage. The early works, there's currently money on the budget to do those geotechs and all those soils, and I would envisage by the end of this year we'll go out to market test what sort of things could be built there and help develop and inform that master plan.
And there'll be community consultation?
Certainly will be.
Along the line? Great, thank you.
Thank you. I will extend for another 10 minutes, noting that there's five of you, I believe, left, maybe 4. So spread it how you will. I'll start with you, Robin Murphy.
Robin Murphy from Karrinyup. I'm convener of the Friends of Trig Beach. My question follows on from Mike Masiello's question in relation to decision-making regarding the proposed coastal boardwalk. I was interested, and I'm afraid I just have to put this in a preamble, that the Mayor said that there are many elected members' workshops, and there was one last night that lasted till whatever time. I'm just interested that these elected members' workshops are all confidential, so there's no way that we as residents and ratepayers can know the process or what's discussed, who's there. And I was also told they're not a decision-making forum, but they very clearly are. Maybe that's a question for another time, an observation I'm making. On the 19th of November last year, I lodged a Freedom of Information request from the Friends of Trig Beach with the city asking for information on how the council reached its decision to allocate $500,000 for a coastal boardwalk feasibility study without community consultation and an accountable and transparent process being followed. The city identified 15 relevant documents, provided me with full access to 1, partial access to 7, and access was refused for 7. I requested an internal review and received the same response from the city. I have now requested an external review by the WA Information Commissioner, who has accepted my request and is investigating the city's decision to give me partial access to 7 documents and its refusal to provide me with access to 7 documents.
So, Ms Murphy, you've used up 2 minutes of those 10 and I haven't had a question yet.
The reason I sought this was an attempt to find out why the council circumvented the usual practice of considering substantial infrastructure such as this boardwalk at a committee meeting and chose instead to bypass the committee process by including it in the corporate business plan where it could not be debated as a separate item. Why was the usual council decision-making process not followed for this $500,000 budget allocation?
Thank you for that question. Normal process was there's many budgets that go through that process. It's an entirely appropriate process for it to go through budget. This city has, I think, something like 300 projects that happen every year, and many of them are determined through that budget process.
My second question is, did any other community projects, included in the corporate business plan 2024 to 2028, such as community learning trails, Christmas lights and investment attractions, also escape the scrutiny of a committee meeting and go straight into the corporate business plan, like the $500,000 boardwalk feasibility study?
Yes, I'm sure there were. We can probably give you some examples in writing.
Can I receive some information on that?
Yes, we'll provide you some in writing.
Which community projects did not go through the committee system?
I've answered that twice.
On tonight's agenda, there is an item, number 12.1 CF3, Investment Attraction Framework Overview, which sounds like the item that was included in the above-mentioned corporate business plan. There was an item called Investment Attraction. I note that this item was considered at a committee meeting, which has recommended it to council. I note that this is part of the city's tourism development strategy and that it identifies strategic places, including Scarborough Beach and coastal nodes. It refers to several projects as game changers or early wins, which is interesting language for a report, I thought. However, these projects are not available for ratepayer scrutiny as they are included in the confidential attachment to the agenda tonight. Are the game changers or early wins in the Scarborough Beach and coastal nodes, and does it include the Mayor's proposed coastal boardwalk?
Thank you for that question. I love that you give me credit for this, but it's not my proposed boardwalk. Ms Shears, can you provide an answer?
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Ms Murphy. That document does include a number of projects across the city. It's an internal document. The reason why it was made confidential is it's subject to change regularly as projects come in and off that list. The purpose for that particular document is a requirement or one of the objectives that we're trying to achieve through the city's economic development and tourism strategy by bringing together a number of projects across the city, throughout the whole city, and to ensure that there's more coordination internally on those projects. There are a number in there in terms of what they are trying to achieve. Some are future projects that we have no influence on, and some are ones that we have influence on in terms of city land and things like that. So there is quite a broad range. Because it is a confidential document, I'm not at liberty to disclose the specific contents of that, and the intent for that document is to be a working document for internal staff.
So you can't tell me whether it includes a proposed coastal boardwalk?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, that's a confidential document.
Thank you for your questions. That has used up the time. Look, there's 3 people left. Can I ask that the 3 people I call out just come up and ask one question, please? We have got through the time. Caroline McLean, if you'd like to start. Mine are fine, they were asked. So. Thank you. Thank you. Roland Hadley.
Good evening, Roland Hadley, Woodlands. Mr Mayor, this proposed boardwalk does not have spectacular ocean views, and if flora and fauna is of little interest, we wonder if your standard statement of an international tourist attraction is believable. Can you please elaborate on the special features of this iconic, innovative 1-kilometre boardwalk? How would it compare to the Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal, or the Statue of Liberty? Or, Mr. Mayor Irwin, can you please confirm that the main reason for this boardwalk is to provide a pathway for future development of the Trigg area? Development at all costs, whatever the cost, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, no, that's not one of the key priorities that has informed this project, Mr. Hadley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question 2, if I can
No,
continue.
that's all we got time
So
for. I need...
Well, for the sake of 10 minutes for the last 2, surely. Thank you.
Mr. Hadley, I'm sorry, we have run out of time.
We haven't run out of time in previous occasions, surely.
We have.
This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions, and I think this council should actually listen to what's been said.
We're happy to take your other questions on notice, but I will invite Mr. Brett Russell to come up and ask a question.
Brett Russell, Trigg.
Thank you.
Now that we know that the use of electric scooters on pathways can be fatal to pedestrians and that people will still be walking on the dual-use path between Scarborough and Trigg, even if the boardwalk was built, would the existing path be upgraded given that electric scooters, bikes and skateboards will continue to use it?
Thank you for that question. I'm not sure if there's any plans currently to upgrade that path. I don't think there's a problem with the condition of the path. But there's also no link necessarily to the e-scooter crash that you're referring to, sir. We acknowledge there's issues with e-scooters. We certainly acknowledge that, but the regulation of those isn't under local government. I appreciate I had to cut question time short there. We have been going for over an hour though, and we have got a significant agenda to get through. So I'll move on now to item 8, which is applications for leave of absence. Councillors, there's been a request from Councillor Andrea Corrado to take a leave of absence from 7th of July to the 1st of August inclusive. Are there any other requests for leave of absence?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, mine's up there now.
Sorry, you've got a request for a leave of absence? Councillor Carlo Perkoff has requested a leave of absence for the period 7th of July to the 10th of August inclusive. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to request a leave of absence from the 5th to the 17th of July. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other requests? I feel like everyone's going to a party I haven't been invited to. Is that no other requests? Can I have someone move that we approve these leave of absence? Thanks, Councillor Papard. Seconded, Councillor Kristovich. Just a show of hands for the leave of absences. That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 9, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I have a mover and a seconder to accept the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 27th of May? Move Councillor Hatton. Seconded, Councillor Olo. And just a show of hands for to accept those minutes, councillors. Thank you. Noting that. Sorry, Councillor, are you in this vote? Yep. Thank you, and that is unanimous. Item 10, announcements by the presiding member. Councillor Lagan, I believe you have one to make tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very pleased to advise that the City of Stirling has claimed Best in Sector honours for the 3rd year in a row and won its 11th straight Gold Award at the 2025 Australasian Reporting Awards. 11 in a row is pretty good. The Australasian Reporting Awards, ARA, were presented in Melbourne, marking the 75th anniversary of a program which encourages excellence in annual reporting in the Asia-Pacific region. Annual reports are a mandatory reporting mechanism for local governments outlining their plans and sharing their operational and financial performance with stakeholders. The City aims to go above and beyond statutory requirements by providing annual reports that are comprehensive and engaging, as well as providing a level of transparency to the City community. The ARA Gold Award recognises overall excellence in an annual report that serves as a model for other organisations to follow. The Best in Sector Award is presented to the organisation that produces a top annual report in the local government sector in the Asia-Pacific region. A big thank you to everyone who contributed to the development of the annual report, and a special thanks for the core working group members, Michelle Wollstonecroft, Sean Smith, Danielle Cavey, Nathan Conway, Clayton Chipper, Cressida Cullity, Jane Hogan-Veen and Liz Lowry for producing another quality publication.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I just follow on, Councillor Lagan, just also acknowledge the team through the CEO and the team underneath. I think, you know, local governments often hear about transparency and accountability, and I think when you look at the amount of work that goes into the strategic community planning process and then the annual reporting process that provides that accountability, to not only have that 11th straight gold award at a level that is across Australasia with massive organisations, both in the private and government sectors, but also to receive that award as best sector, the best in honours for that whole sector across Australasia is a big credit to the City of Stirling. I also just want to call out City of Joondalup and Wanneroo, who also received gold awards and were finalists in the best sector. So to have 3 in WA, I think says a lot for the culture in Western Australia and the way local governments transact with their communities. Well done. Item 11, unresolved business. I have nil. Now on to reports and recommendations from committee. We'll go on to items from the Planning and Development Committee held on the 3rd of June 2025. Now, item 12.1 CF1 must be pulled out due to a financial disclosure. Councillor Kristovich has also submitted an alt-rec for the same item, 12.1 CF1. Are there any other planning and development items that councillors wish to be pulled out? Councillor Dudek?
Can I pull out 12.1 CF2?
You may. Councillor Reid?
Oops. May I please have 12.1, 8.1, please?
You may. Thank you, councillors. Item 12.1 CF1 is required to be pulled out due to Councillor Hatton's disclosure of a financial interest. Just checking there's no other disclosures. Councillors, there is a motion on the screen for your consideration. And I'll ask Councillor Hatton just to leave the room for this. Other way, Councillor Hatton. All right, go out that way because that's closed. There's a motion on the screen for your consideration, which is to allow any councillors with a financial interest to be present for any deliberation, discussion and voting on this item. Councillor, can I have a mover of a motion if you wish to move that? Councillor Proud's happy to move that. Councillor Lagan is happy to second that. If we can just put that to a vote, a show of hands, if you're happy for Councillor Hatton to be present. Thank you. No, that's all right. So show of hands, councillors, just so I can count. Oh, that is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. So we can invite Councillor Hatton back in. For those who are wondering what just happened, whilst financial interest may be something that normally would preclude councillors from deliberating or discussing an item, given that this is a local planning screen across the whole of the City of Stirling, it's not unreasonable that a councillor may have a perceived or an actual interest that they disclose, but we believe as a council it's probably fairly important that they still have a say in a city that spans 100 square kilometres and delivers for 250,000 residents. So we will move on to that item now, 12.1 CF1, the draft local planning scheme, number 4, outcomes of advertising. As Chair of the Committee, Councillor Proud.
Happy to move the committee recommendation on page 12. I believe we've got an amended to be added.
I believe so. Is there a second for this? Deputy Mayor Migdale? Thank you. Is there anyone opposed to it? Yeah, we'll do an opposed. Councillor Kristovich, and you can test that. There'll be an easier way to do.
Thank you very much.
No, take a seat. Oh. Thanks. You're not in Parliament anymore. Councillor Proud. Just your microphone,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was a very long meeting we had with a good number of deputations of people in favour and against of separate singular items on the LPS4. I'm not going to go through all those. They were mentioned, they were discussed and debated by council. It was unfortunate you weren't able to be there. You would have enjoyed it, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sure.
No, there was some really good discussion by the residents, the deputies as well. So I'm happy to stand on the back of this. The officers already, planning officers today, Mr. Lafort, Mr. Fletcher, and of course our director, have covered off on where we sit with smaller changes for activity centres, which would actually go back out to advertising with 20,000 people and another 2 years down the track, and by then we'd be getting slapped into next week by...
I just think we should clarify that. It's not 2 years down that. I just don't want to make it sound like it's the worst thing in the world.
Sorry, a longish period, a delayed period, and council, all LGAs have to, you know, put some decent, thorough work into their local planning schemes and get them done within a fairly limited period. So we're sort of at the pointy end. And as the Director for Planning, Ms Shears, has also outlined, there are some avenues for addressing some minor issues, and that was addressed at the planning meeting as well with the deputies. Minor things that aren't going to make a significant difference. You'll notice in one of the attachments what the Minister has told us. They've sent back the initial draft and said, take this out, that out, put this in, add dot points. This has been thoroughly reviewed by them as well, and then to allow us to go out to advertising. So this is where we stand right now, and happy to hear from others.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a lot to add. We did discuss this robustly, and as Councillor Proud rightly stated, we teased this out at committee. There's not a whole lot that I can add. Which I did add the other night was clause 9, K, which was to enhance and conserve the cultural heritage, significance and character within designated heritage areas, which will offer another layer of protection or influence. I don't believe we got it 100% right in this instance. I do believe that there were a few issues here and there, though I feel confident that those issues, once this does come to fruition, those issues will be resolved within the next 12 to 24 months. Certain areas that I feel could potentially offer more in the way of density, etc., that have not been included for whatever reasons. Overall, I congratulate officers for an excellent job. This is an excellent, very, very high quality body of work, and I do believe that we've hit as close to the mark as we possibly could get. So thank you to officers, and I wholly support this. Thank you.
Councillor Kristovich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you want me to say a few words first, or put my...
Yeah, however you want to do it.
Okay, well, firstly, I suppose what I want to say is that, you know, we talk about good planning outcomes, and you have ministers, and you have local councillors, and you have the community, all having those conversations about having good community outcomes when we do planning and development. And that's the intention of everybody, to try and head down that path. Yet, there are many examples where we have bad community outcomes as a result of the decisions that are made. And, you know, a perfect example is the Karrinyup Shopping Centre redevelopment. Great redevelopment in itself, but the outcomes there for the local community have been very negative in terms of access, road networks, etc. Again, it was something the community was opposed to. It was something the council was saying shouldn't happen, but the minister and the government said, no, fantastic idea. JDAP, the various planning experts all said, no, this is a perfect development, it looks great. And that's just an example, one example of many I could give, where we set a very bad example to the community by doing bad developments and then selling them as good developments before we do it. And then we try and do that over and over again. And that's a very difficult process. And even in this situation here where, you know, again, I know from speaking to the Director of Planning and the officers, You know, we've tried to deal with the minister and the department to try and be able to have those unique developments around certain local centres, putting up suggestions and ideas. Again, you know, being knocked back by the minister to say, no, that's not what we want you to do. We want you to go out on this particular development or suggestion in this particular way. And the third example I'll just cover on very quickly is the Cromer Way, the housing development there. Again, the state government said to us, go out to community consultation. We did, we got all the feedback. We then discussed it as a council. We made an intelligent, informed, educated decision to say it should be R40. We sent it back to the department and the minister, and they just ignored it all and just went back to whatever they originally wanted to do. So I find it difficult for us to have good planning outcomes when nobody is listening. And, you know, it's important for the community to understand that, you know, they're not listening to us in local government either. And there's examples where we do submissions to JDAP and special development panels where 9 out of 10 times we approve and support the developments that are going through, and then there'll be 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20 that we say, hey, hold on, this one is actually not appropriately done. You need to retweak it around the edges, and again, we are totally ignored. So it's like we're pro-development, we're very supportive of the process, we give good suggestions and ideas to try and make it better, and yet we get ignored. The community gets ignored. And this is just another example where I suppose the department and the minister...
You probably want it, sorry, Councillor, you probably want to get onto your amendment before you run out of time, though.
Oh, okay, well, the amendment I want to add to is in terms of just obviously dealing with that frustration so that the minister understands, you know, what's going on. So what I really want to do is put a point number 3 onto the current motion, and that reads that the Mayor write to the Minister for Planning to outline our concerns that the city is unable to treat some local centres differently to other high-order centres in the city. And that basically...
I'm happy to accept that.
There you go, the mover's...
Deputy Mayor.
The mover's happy to accept that. I'll see if the deputy's happy to accept that. I can put them separately if that helps. Yeah. So the mover and seconder are happy to accept that, so it becomes part of the substantive. If anyone during debate wishes to have it or has an issue with those, just let me know and I can put them separately, and that way it saves having a whole separate vote. Continue.
And fundamentally, the reason for this is, look, I understand that the government and the minister said to us all local centres are equal, but we know that's not true. We know that back in the 1950s, 60s and so forth, you know, certain properties were rezoned and redefined to meet the needs at the time. So when North Beach was in the wilderness, this, for example, this yellow site, former yellow site, was zoned as a local centre to meet a need at that point in time. The world has moved on since then. Would we spot zone a block like that today and make it a local centre just along West Coast Drive randomly? I don't think we would. I don't think we'd pick that location. And even as part of this process, we haven't gone around the City of Stirling and said, well, actually, there's another 50 locations we could make local centres, which aren't at the moment because they are close to transport or they're whatever some other reason. So we haven't done any of that sort of work. So I just think it's silly that, you know, we're not able to have that influence and the community isn't able to get that outcome because, you know, most local centres, yes, will meet those requirements, but not all of them will. And I understand exactly what the local community is saying. We all know the process that we went through to get here. We understand the hurdles that we went through, but I also understand that, you know, unfortunately, local government and planning are becoming more and more disconnected as the years go by, and all those powers are reverting to the minister and the department, and we have very little say. We do have a say, and the community still thinks we have some level of influence, but from my perspective, what I've seen, we have virtually no influence. Even when stupid decisions are being made, silly outcomes are being delivered, we have good arguments, and yet they are being overridden for the sake of just development for development's sake. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Councillor Ree, you indicated?
Yes, thank you. I object as well. I mean, I'd like to put up the motion to refer this because I actually think that when I look at how many submissions we've had, mainly from the one area, not enough people know. Some of these comments made by the staff are that they got no comment from the landowner, so they're not changing it. So I think with all those, I'd like to refer for further public consultation, please.
Thank
so
you.
That's
that is a referral motion.
Yes.
Is there a seconder to refer LPS 4? Sorry, councillor, your referral motion lapses.
Fine, I'll just go with why I say no. I think one thing about it is I totally agree, and yes, there's a lot of work by staff which I really appreciate, but I totally agree with Councillor Krisovich. One size doesn't fit all. It is concerning with some of these issues in here that, like sitting on the DAPs do not recognise half our structure plans. They don't recognise some of the things we actually write in there. So how are we, this doesn't tighten it up to protect, I think, the public, their consultation, their comments. And we've sat through so many of them in here where I just don't think the message is getting across. So I would have liked to have seen it a bit stronger, and somehow that the DAP members respect what we say and what our structure plans mean. So to me, I think it just needed to be tougher in some ways. I thought it was a concern that coming back to the liquor stores, which we've raised a lot of times, years ago that we used to have a process where we would only have, under the planning scheme, certain number of liquor stores in an area. People are now questioning the fact that you can have 4 or 5 liquor stores within like 1 kilometre. Why haven't we got that into the scheme, that we're trying to do that?
I'll actually get Ms Shears to provide comment. I don't think that's our role to, I think that's liquor and gaming.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct. That's not our role to determine how many are in a particular area. That's the same with a number of uses throughout the city as well.
I'm aware that that isn't. It used to be our role. We used to have precincts where we said how many were in each area. What I was saying was that I wish we could bring that back, and there may be somewhere in the scheme we can actually say that. And that's why I think this needs to be stronger in order for us to combat what goes on at DAPs. So that was my point. With some of these as well, I'll take example of Churchlands on page 159. There is a comment made in here, which is 59. Where are we? Churchlands. It's regarding the road going through from the connector road. The comment by the staff was the connector road is referred to as a reserve under the Metropolitan Regional Scheme as a primary regional road and unrelated to LPS 4. I would have thought if we're going to design things and we're looking at parking, which is a major issue that this is supposed to address, that things like these distributor roads, connector roads, would actually be included. I'm concerned about that comment.
I think the comment is just stating a fact. There is currently no connector road. It is a reserve under the MRS scheme.
It's a highway reserve.
The comment is made is that it's unrelated to LPS 4. What I'm saying is it should be related to LPS 4 to give us stronger traction so they don't do the connector road there, that we protect the residents where they are, that with the schools, with the accidents, with the parking, all of those things need to be considered. This is why we're doing this LPS 4. That's what I thought, to make the system better.
I understand the point you're trying to make, but let's be very clear. It's the MRS, Metropolitan Regional Scheme, and it's a highway reserve. The state government's currently doing preliminary checks on that, but this is a local planning scheme.
I'm aware that it's a local planning scheme, but what I'm saying is that this is why we're making it tighter. Okay. That's the whole point of doing this scheme. So the comment, I think it should have been a better comment when we've got such a controversial system at the moment with some of those roads. If I go to page 152, with regard to Scarborough, the parking, 047, the parking on the site is not public and therefore is no current obligation on the landowner to provide public parking. The requirement for 30 parking bays would make any future development on the site unviable. The city's current local planning strategy seeks to rationalise parking and encourage active means of transport. Isn't this the whole point? That we do these things for parking, that people shouldn't be doing great big developments and then sit there and say, oh, well, if you don't get parking bays, that's fine, it's not viable, don't do it. Again, I thought the whole idea of this, intent of this, was to tighten it up, make it better for the community, and issues like parking would be addressed so that people can't go and do developments unless they provide some parking or reciprocal parking somewhere, or contribute to the City of Stirling building 100 towers of parking, something.
Sure, but that particular site that you're referring to on that page refers to a development on equivalent of 2 single lots. So a requirement to provide 30 public bays would be unreasonable, which is why it was removed.
I do recall a cake shop, someone wanting to start up a little powder cake shop in Mount Lawley, just opening during the day, breakfast and lunch, and they had to have 8 parking bays.
Yeah, no, that's not what that's about. That's saying that,
But
for
I'm saying
example,
that they've got to
that
have
block,
some.
which is the equivalent of, say, the yellow block size, the original scheme had that they had to not only supply their own 8 or 10 or 15 parking for residential or whatever, they had to supply another 30 bays. It's not possible.
Whether it's not possible or not is not our issue. What I'm saying is, all I'm trying to do is tighten it up, and I just felt
That's what the scheme and the response to the submissions does in that page.
but not in some of these requirements.
Sure. I'm just saying
While
that particular one.
it's changing, it is really
So what-
important that we do, and that we do across the city. All I'm saying is, I think it should have been tougher. Where are we there? 139. On 139, don't know what 139 was. With the one in Bulga, and the changes that were commenced.
Councillor, you're coming
projects.
up to your time. Would you like an extension, or are you?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
My point is that there are a lot of examples going through here, and as I said before, I think it's a really great document, but it needed to have more people advertise. I think, that was my last comment. My last comment is that when we look on page 16, and thank you very much for the tables coming back into us, when we look at how many submissions, 141 were the pro formas, and as you rightly made the comment, most of them for the one area. But what concerns me is when you have the amount of people who objected and those who just outside the city. Good to see more people involved. But when this is across the city, I don't think it got to as many people to know what happened in their area. And yes, we did a lot of consultation, but I think some places didn't know the implications. So I think we have to be cognizant of the fact of how many people objected. And yes, some of their objections were personalised, and that's okay. But I just felt that needed to be, more people needed to get involved, and that's why I think it needed a referral. But obviously the councillors around the table didn't agree, so therefore, and no offence to the staff, because I think it was a really great job, but I do believe that people that a lot of these things needed to be tightened up. If we're going to go and fight with the DAPs and fight for the right of our ratepayers, our community, then this should be a stronger document.
Thank you for that feedback, Councillor. All I can do is just give you assurance that this has been a process that's been ongoing for a number of years. It hasn't happened in 6 months. And it's been extensively advertised, and I think the submissions were close to 500 submissions. So it certainly had significant feedback from the community as well. Are there any other indications from Council? If not, I will go back to Councillor Proud.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Chair.
I'd point councillors to go to page 87 just to remind themselves the Minister's direction on what we had to change. This is a fabulous document. There's been a lot thought about. There have been amendments made by the officers after submissions have been received. Page 159, the Link Road, Metropolitan Region Scheme, Stevenson Highway Road Reserve. No, it is not in our local planning scheme. And nor do we count trees on Crown land. That they don't form a part of the city's trees. We all know that. Also, I'd remind every councillor, I know I presume every other councillor had a meeting with planning officers. I had 2, one at the early stages of it going out and after the submissions had come in. Everybody would have had that opportunity. So And Councillor Roy raises good points. However, good points to bring up at committee. We had a really good debate there, and residents had their say, and they were certainly heard and listened to. And some changes were taken on board and able to be tweaked. So with that, I'd like to move it as it has been moved at committee unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor. So that is closed. I will put that motion with that amendment down the bottom.
Let's go.
Thanks, councillors. That motion is carried. That was a fantastic close. Well done. Well done, councillor. So I will just check with the manager of governance.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you believe there was an error in the voting, you can call the vote again.
Yeah, can I scrap the vote, councillors? I'm fairly confident that the mover and the closer of that did not mean to vote against it. So, yeah. And so I will open that up, ready, and if you can vote again, please, councillors. That seems more like it. There you go. Thank you. And that motion is carried with councillor Ree voting against LPS 4. Thank you, and well done to the officers. I do acknowledge it's great to have so many of the planning team here tonight to support their body of work as well. Ms Shears, I know it's been a long time coming, but yeah, I congratulate you on the team on it. An incredible amount of work trying to, obviously not everyone is always going to be happy when you're dealing with, again, 250,000 residents, but I think you've done a really good job to get it to this stage. Thank you. 12.1 CF2 has been pulled out by Councillor Dudek. Councillor Proud as chair of the committee. Do you want to move?
I'll move the committee recommendation to page 272. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Giudice. And is there anyone opposed? Councillor Dudek. Councillor Proud.
Lots of, I was going to say chatter, debate. Last Tuesday at the Planning and Development Committee. I'm happy with how that debate went. It wasn't you that moved it, no. But anyway, you supported it then, but hey, love to listen to you.
Yep. Councillor Giudice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's as Councillor Proud indicated, yeah, we had a number of questions I asked, in fact, about the policy, and yeah, I was satisfied with the officer's responses about how we will endeavour to seek, yeah, I suppose a greater tree, I suppose provision on non-residential land, and yeah, I wholly support the policy being adopted tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Dudek.
Thanks, team. Yeah, I chose not to oppose this item at committee last week, but after a few instances this week dealing with residents' complaints about how our various tree policies were being applied, I had a bit of a road to Damascus type experience, and Damascus doesn't have many trees there, so maybe more of a road to Mirrabooka bushland type experience. But it gave me pause to re-examine our policies that are going to be replaced with this new policy, and I don't believe this represents an improvement. It's also fairly evident that most of us councillors who have plenty of time to review these policies on trees find them very hard to understand. And given that, I feel sorry for our ratepayers in trying to navigate these policies themselves. I also believe that many councillors are under the impression that this specific policy doesn't apply at all to residential developments, but that's not true either. And it does explicitly say that Section 4 and Section 6 do apply to residential development. I actually love trees, and I believe the goal of the city to plant and retain more is a worthwhile one, but I'm not sure how we've gone from a reasonable approach that allows discretion to the current hardline approach that leaves us at loggerheads with the residents we're meant to represent a lot of the time. Now, very recently, I had a woman who lived in her house in Mirrabooka for the past 50 years, maintained a beautiful garden full of trees, and she was on the phone to me crying her eyes out as the city had, without her being aware, dug up her paved driveway to create a 0.5 metre square hole in order to plant one of our street trees that was required by our policies. Now, I'm not sure how this improves our suburbs, and I struggle to believe that a tree would even be able to grow and be sustained at this location. But to double back now to the landscaping portion of this policy, I want to contrast the objectives of our old policy, which was passed in 2017, I believe. The stated objective was that the landscape design enhances streetscape, pedestrian amenity, improves the visual appeal and comfort of open space areas. Now, fast forward to the policy we're looking to pass today. The new policy on page 281, section 5.2, part G states, lawn/turf should be minimised in landscaped areas unless it is for a particular purpose. Now, I'm not sure when grass became the enemy, but I personally love our green spaces and our residents enjoy having these green spaces too. I usually don't have a particular purpose necessarily for the grass that I walk on, and sure, if it was mulch instead, I guess I'd still be able to walk on it. But I just believe the direction we're going here is antithetical to the reason I chose to run for council in the first place. I chose to run in order to be able to represent ratepayers, and with the confusing array of new tree policies that the city is passing, I'm finding this increasingly difficult to navigate. And as such, I won't be supporting this tonight, and I'd like to foreshadow an alternative motion with 2 points. One being that pursuant to the Planning and Development Regulations 2015, Council does not adopt amended local planning policy 6.6. And number two, that a workshop be held with councillors after the 2025 local government elections in order to reassess our policies on trees and landscaping with a view to meet our tree canopy targets while balancing resident concerns.
Thank you.
Was that all captured?
Well, I think, but if it's a foreshadowed motion, so it's not up yet. I think the intent is there.
Yeah.
And I'll remind councillors there is a foreshadowed motion.
Yeah. So now I know many of you likely won't want to rock the boat and vote with me here. However, I also know that many of you share my concerns. I love trees, I love lawns, so I just think we should go about this in a more measured way.
Thanks, councillor. I want to acknowledge a very eloquent debate. Very good. But I do want to just get some clarification. I just think it's important that we get, because they're different policies. I think, so it's not to argue with you, but if we get Ms. Shears just to clarify. So this particular policy relates to the Development Directorate. It's not necessarily a tree policy, and it's predominantly commercial with some private, but it's certainly not verge planting or any of those. And I know you're probably aware of most of that. But I'll get Ms. Shears to just provide.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. The sections that you quoted, Councillor Dudek, 4 and 6 are the only sections that apply to residential. The remainder of this policy is for commercial and industrial development only. So I guess the query around the lawn is predominantly aimed at those developments. The intent of having a water wise or encouraging landscaping to be more savvy with its water use is so that there isn't a cost burden on these businesses to maintain that landscaping, and it is remaining in place. That's more successful in ensuring that we have a better looking streetscape in these areas.
Just to clarify on that point, and yeah, very well understood. I take all that. The move to have less lawn is to reduce cost burden.
Ms. Shears?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're not suggesting that they have to remove. It's very unusual that we would get a commercial development just requiring or requesting to have lawn. If they do, they still can absolutely put that forward. That's completely up to them. This is a policy, meaning it can be varied. We're not intending for policy in our framework. You're not intended to slavishly comply with it. It's not the planning scheme, it's a policy, so it is treated a little bit differently. We are encouraging canopy. Yes, that's certainly what we want. We do want our commercial areas, particularly Osborne Park, to have a canopy and to be able to have, I guess, some amenity for the workers throughout that area as well. The waterwise statement, or I guess the talk about the lawn, is purely around the maintenance issue that we have with commercial developments.
Councillor Ree?
Thank you. That is a concern. I mean, whether we like it or not, you've actually incorporated 4 and 6. You've said it is actually applicable to residential property. So I think that's where people have read it and thought it is applicable to us. So that is a concern. I'm also concerned with the ability for people to take away the lawn and then use it as parking, especially around Osborne Park, Scarborough, other places in Aloo, where they would just love to just get rid of the lawn and put parking in because there's just a premium to find a park a car. So to me, that would actually make the neighbourhood actually look worse because you've got no lawn and you might have one spindly tree. I didn't see in here, which we did incorporate in the DAPS, that what a mature tree is. That if you get approval to put in a tree and it dies, that they have to replace it, or did I miss it? Because I put that up quite a few years ago.
Mr Lafort.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor, where there is requirements for landscaping plans and trees to be planted, conform conditions of planning approval, and if those trees are removed or died, they can be replaced and through conditions of planning approval through the compliance process. We also have officer who's dealing with trees, obviously, and ensuring that development conditions are being complied with and those trees are actually being maintained.
For how long? Because we did say for the life of the tree. So that means that it's very difficult for staff, if they find a tree that's dead, you know, to go out there and then say it doesn't conform to the planning approval. But we didn't have for the life of the tree, for the life of who? It didn't say? Wood brewers? I don't know.
Mr Lafort.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. The trees run with the planning approval. So if there's a planning approval, although the city's not going out looking for dead trees, if someone reports one, and it is part of a planning approval, it can be investigated because the tree will be on the landscaping plan, which forms part of the planning approval, that then can be go and checked. So whilst we're not going around looking for these things, if it is brought to the city's attention, it will be investigated and the appropriate action will be taken. So there is a avenue to go through that.
Thank you. Let's hope it's nice and tight. On page 375, where we've got the submissions, I'm very concerned with the number of submissions.
Why?
One. This is well, the amount of people that ring me up about trees at least once a day. I'm sure we all do as well.
Once a day.
I could send them all to you if you like. I just think that this is very unusual that we would get only one submission. So that means that people aren't aware, and that also makes me concerned. And I take on board a lot of the comments by Councillor Dudek, and I just don't know that if people understand the implications. While I like my trees, fighting to keep my trees, and the Carnaby cockatoos are eating all my olives, I do enjoy them. On page 280, where they talk about the verge and the landscaping, minimum 10% of the site provided landscape. Now, does that include or not include the verge?
Mr Lafort.
Through you, Mr Mayor, though that does not include the verge, so that's just the site itself.
Thank you. Is it unencumbered?
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, can you explain what are you referring to as being unencumbered?
Well, under law, unencumbered means that it's grass or bush or just trees. It's not paved, not concrete, not a house, not a toilet, nothing. It's just bush. So that's unencumbered. So if it's 10% has been unencumbered, when we have a look at some of these corner blocks, which are now R30, which is a bit of an issue, if you take away the verge, as I was informed, then we should have at least 30% out of a potential 700 square metres, 3721, so that at least 21 should be landscaping. But I can tell you they're not. So are we...
You've lost me.
How are we doing
Mr Lafort's going to have a go at this.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. No, this is commercial industrial premises. So you're not talking about residential R30 lots and 300 square metre lots. We're talking about larger scale commercial. It might be something in Osborne Park, for example. So we're requiring that landscaped area within those commercial areas. So that's really what this is about.
But through you, 4 and 5 are applicable to residential. So we could say to them.
Mr Fletcher.
True.
Mr Fletcher's going to have a go at this one.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. A bit of a technical answer, but where residential development is concerned, the residential design codes apply and they would prevail over this this policy for tree planting requirements, which is why, although if you refer to the application of this policy section, it refers to all development excluding those particular sections where residential development is concerned, we use the requirements of the residential design codes for tree planting.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the developments, that's an interesting one. I'd like to see that one played out in court with some of these people. But anyway,
I don't know if this would get to court. I don't think it's that.
Some
I don't
people
think it's
do
that
like
serious.
their trees, and I would push to. I fought to keep my trees. I can tell you on my block.
But again, this is
So-
predominantly commercial.
Yeah, so when you look at Osmond Park, when they were allowed to build car yards, and they've got green trees and green lawn down the verge, everything else is concrete. Where do we go with that one? It's just, I mean, the Glendalough precinct should have had a component of having residential, should have had a component of all sorts of things, but they didn't. They got approved, and it's just wall-to-wall concrete with a bit of verge. So how is that applicable in the commercial sense?
So I'm not sure. So are you opposed to this policy? But you don't want concrete on all those blocks. But you don't want a tree. I'm just lost with the debate. Council, I'll try to get an answer to that.
The point is that if there's a percentage is supposed, 10% is supposed to be landscaping, and therefore 10%, if especially with some of the blocks, which are probably over 1,000 square metres, and it doesn't include the verge, therefore one would assume that you would have at least 100 square metres of unencumbered land, grass, bush, whatever. So what I'm saying is, from what we can see in Scarborough Beach Road, it's not happening.
Mr. Lafort.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. That's right. A lot of commercial areas don't have the requirement. You drive through a lot of the areas and they are all concrete. That's what we're trying to change with this. So we're trying to actually introduce some more landscaping into those areas. So for new developments, they will actually have that. And that'll help with the canopy issue as well that we've got a reduction of. So it's in those commercial areas, or it could be a neighbourhood centre or a redevelopment for that, where we want to start seeing those deep soil areas where we can actually get trees to grow and provide that canopy and contribute to the amenity of the area. So we're really trying to improve things with this. When we did consultation, we actually reached out to a lot of businesses that lodged landscaping plans with the city, targeted to say, look, is this reasonable? Is this the sort of thing that you could see happening to get those numbers and those percentages? We've also based it on other planning documents that have similar. So yeah, in the past, for sure, there's been obviously zero landscaping in a lot of lots. We're really trying to change that with this.
Noting that the ward councillors for that area have been heavily advocating for that. Councillor Reid, can I just note that you are at the end of your time?
I'm at my end. Oh boy, am I at my end. With only one person making a response, that still is a concern to me. I think under our current planning scheme, we should have been able to cover whether or not they have a percentage of unencumbered land. So while in theory I support it, I think this is far too heavy-handed and it doesn't allow a lot of discretionary power for certain developments where you can actually get more or less. And bearing in mind how people feel about their trees and the importance that we do have trees in our neighbourhood or wherever they are, I just don't think, I think this is too heavy-handed at the moment and not given enough leeway for other people to make a comment.
Thank you. I will note, I've got Councillor Christopher and I've got the Deputy Mayor, noting that the policies have discretion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, obviously this has been debated a lot in terms of just trees and generally, and I know the debate has sort of swung into residential, which obviously this doesn't relate to residential. But as a council, we've made a commitment to try and improve our tree canopy. And, you know, even with that commitment and with increased funding, we know we're going to fall short by a long way. So we know our industrial areas don't have a tree canopy. We know they are concrete jungles. I can't see how people could be opposed to a tree being put in front of an industrial property via a policy that is done with negotiation and agreement with those people. So it's beyond me to understand how we could not support something like that. I mean, my dealings with trees and residents has actually been pretty good. I think I've had a pretty good outcomes with the city officers in the trees and the residents I've represented. I'm not sure how well others have gone, but I can say that on some occasions the residents have a valid point and other occasions they don't. And they're very happy to accept the outcome of those decisions as long as they're informed. So in terms of this, If this was to pass, which I think it should, it'll take us probably 1,000 years to change the tree canopy in those industrial areas. Because you're talking about redevelopment, you're talking about a whole process. So let's not kid ourselves here. People are thinking, I'm not sure what people are thinking, but unfortunately, we're going to have a concrete jungle for a long time. And we need to speed that process up. We need to have less of a concrete jungle. And, you know, this policy is a good policy, but it probably doesn't push the barrow far enough in some cases. So I think in that respect, it's you know, it's very balanced. I think the fact that we haven't had a conga line of people complaining, you know, from what the industrial areas is a testament to the fact that this policy is a very measured policy, which does take into account all of the considerations and circumstances, but it also needs to take into account our receding tree canopy and the problem we have. And that's the bottom line. You know, we can't fix that. We've had that discussion as a council, and we can set targets, you know, aspirational targets, but we know we can't achieve them. Doesn't matter what we do, we can't achieve those targets on our own land. So we're obviously still investing heavily. We're still trying to head in that direction. Obviously, as we know, recently we actually adjusted our target as a city because it was too much. We didn't want to set an unrealistic target that we were never going to achieve. So I don't see any issues with this policy. It is a policy. It is subject to agreement, negotiation, discussion. You know, councillors can represent their community. I know the Osborne Ward councillors were very passionate about this from their particular perspective in terms of the Osborne Ward not having as many trees as the other wards. And I just don't see any negative downside in this at all for anybody. And a policy can always be changed. If there's a problem or an issue, we can always bring it back and say, hey, there's things being identified, there's unintended consequences. We can change it just as easily as that. So I just don't see the problem.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And interestingly, I do see the problem. I do see the problem. And on several points, I do concur with Councillor Dudek and the issues he has raised. Coincidentally, I was contacted just today by a resident who had asked me the question as to why they have been asked to pay $700 or thereabouts for a verge tree, which won't be planted for several years, as their house hasn't even commenced construction, and yet they have received several notices from our city saying, hey, pay us the $700 for your verge tree. So I'm looking at under 6.6, 4C, I think it is. But when I read through, 4C says conditions of development approval may be imposed that require payments for planting new street trees, removal and, where approved by the city, replacement of existing street trees and other arboricultural works as deemed necessary by the city. So my concern is this. I am all for our tree canopy and growing out our tree canopy, not at the expense of our residents. If we are planting city trees on city land, which is verge, why then would we push back and have residents have to pay for our asset because the tree essentially has a Halliwell value and it is our asset, and yet we push back on residents for financial to plant and to water and maintain. And I've got to extend this to any size development, whether it's residential or commercial. If it is an asset of the city, which we agree that a tree is, it is planted and always the property of the city, then why is there any question of requesting payment for that? I draw the line there. I felt it was very unfair when it was put to me earlier today, and I can't accept this as it currently stands. There are also several other issues, but that is a real issue that I have had to face today. So on the basis that this is not exactly as we should, we should always be looking to roll out a planning policy that is at its highest and best. I don't believe this is in its highest and best form. There is still issues. I'd like to foreshadow to hold this over to the next council meeting so that we can attend to particular details with this item.
So two things. So before we go to that, I'll just get, because you talked about basically a development approval condition that you pay for a tree. I'll just get Ms Shears to provide some clarity on that for you. And then if you'd like to move a procedural, you can do that without foreshadowing it.
Okay.
Yep.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that. In terms of the payment for verge trees, yes, that is a long-standing process that the city has had for all new developments in the city, whether it be residential, commercial or industrial. The reason we have included that component, even though it's not directly related to this particular policy, is to encourage developers to think about the verge tree location when they are doing their own landscaping. When we have developments come through, we often then end up with a clash in terms of where our verge trees are going and where their landscaping is going, and there's limited space in that verge sometimes. So ensuring that the trees have enough root space, footpaths, things like that can still be accommodated. That's why we've included in this policy. So that requirement for payment is not in this policy. It's driven by a separate policy from council.
Sorry, through you, Matt, to the director, I can see in 4C, it outlines, is it 4C? It outlines the payment, that require payments. So DAs may be imposed that require payments for planting new street trees. So just to be clear, it says maybe, but it seems to me that based on my experience today, that it is the case and that it's not a maybe. It either is or it isn't for everybody or nobody.
Sure. Ms Shears?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if the site already has existing trees, then they aren't going to be conditioned for to pay a contribution for new street trees. That's why it is the wording in there in terms of may. It's dependent on each application as they come through. So those requirements, although are linked in this policy, we're flagging it with the applicants and the developers of this land. We get, I guess, that requirement from the city tree policy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move a procedural, please, to hold this over.
Thank you. And to what would you like to hold it over to?
Hold it over to...
future planning and development, the next planning and development?
Yes, please.
And there...
Is that after July?
It's a little way away. Yeah, it'll be August sometime.
Does that allow enough time for it to be resolved prior to caretaker?
Yep.
Yep.
I don't think there's any...
So yes.
Because there's currently a policy in place, so I don't think there's any issue with that. Councillor Olo, was that you seconding? Yes. Okay, that is a procedural motion to hold it over to a planning and development probably in August, I think at this stage. I'll just put that procedural to the vote.
We're voting on the procedural.
Hopefully. Thank you. That motion is carried. So it's just a procedural. We'll hold it over. I don't think there's any urgency for this. There seems like there's quite a few things that can be resolved. I definitely suggest a couple of councillors sounded quite confused when they debated, and maybe to set up a meeting with the team to discuss some of those issues would be very helpful. Some of them even stated it, I'll just say. Councillor Reid, can I ask you a very simple question? I need a yes or a no. You've asked for 12.1, 8.1 to be pulled out. Do you want to discuss it or do you just want to vote against?
No, I'd like to discuss that, please. And
That's all I need.
Prepared, it's confidential.
No,
but I just one more comment.
No, that's all I want.
No,
I want take a seat, please.
It's not related to that. It's
Councillor.
related to the investment.
Councillor, take a seat, please. Well,
I forgot to say, could I just ask a question about the investment?
About?
12.1
It hasn't been pulled out.
No, I just said that. I forgot to say, could I just ask a question about that?
Can't you just take it offline, councillor? I don't see the need to ask questions about agenda items that have been in the public realm for well over a week. You could have easily asked those questions offline. 2 weeks.
Fine.
Councillor Proud, noting that we're removing 12.1, 8.1 and we'll deal with it at the end of the meeting as a confidential item, can I ask you to move the balance of the reports?
Happy to move the balance of report.
Thank you. Councillor Kristovich has seconded that. I'll go to the electronic vote just to approve the balance of reports if we can. Got a couple to go. Got Councillor Ferrante, Councillor Reid. Councillor Reid, your vote. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. So those members who are still in the gallery and those viewing at home, the remainder of the Planning Development Committee recommendations, with the exception of 8.1, have been adopted by exception resolution. We'll go on to item 13 and we'll move to 13.1, the review of delegated authority on page 305, noting that an absolute majority is required. Councillor Lagan, you're happy to move that recommendation?
Happy to move. I've got some questions.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Reid. Is anyone opposed? If not, I'll allow a couple of questions. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just referring to page 307 of our agenda. And through you, it says removal of authorised officers delegation due to the amendment of the Local Government Act 1995 in November 2020. Council is no longer responsible for the appointment of authorised persons for the purpose of performing certain functions under the Local Government Act. Can officers give me an example of what one of those certain functions might be?
Yeah, Joe.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So authorised persons perform certain functions such as issuing infringement notices under local laws. It might be other particular activities under local laws. So it's really related to enforcement provisions under a range of local laws and other statutory provisions as well.
So just further to that, through you, Mr. Mayor, that would already be covered under the authority that the CEO gives, for instance, security staff.
Mr. Slentz.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So what had happened back in November 2020, the power to appoint authorised persons related to the local government. All that has happened now is that that has now actually changed to the CEO. So the CEO has on-delegated the authority to appoint authorised persons to the Director of Planning and the Director of Community Development. So in effect, nothing has actually changed. It's just the fact that Council no longer has the power to on-delegate that responsibility to the CEO.
Thank you. Further to that, I'm looking at page 114 of the under separate cover document that looks at new contracts and delegated authority. And through you, Mr. Mayor, category A talks about the CEO having a delegated authority for procurement and value of goods and services to the value of $500,000. What is the trigger figure for that level of expenditure to allow those tenders to come to council? Is it 250,000 and above, or is it right up to the $500,000?
Might go Ms Hawkins for this one.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Reagan. That is any contract that's to be awarded that's 500,000 or above. The 250,000 limit is where we require a public tender.
Yes, so just to clarify, the 250 will trigger a tender process which the elected members would probably see anyway through
Ms
committee.
Hawkins.
Through the Mayor, that's correct, unless it was tender exempt, for example, a WAGA panel or a CUA arrangement. But if the contract's 500 and above, it will come to council for approval.
Yep. Also on the same document, page 115, it goes on to say under category A that the same $500,000 delegation is also given to the Director of Corporate Services. Could the Director give an example of where that Director might need to spend $500,000?
Yes, Ms Hawkins. Where would you spend that?
One rubbish truck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I have an example coming up, actually, Councillor Lagan. So we've
Excellent.
been out to tender for our new human capital management system.
Yep.
We have a contract coming to community committee for the licence fee, but the implementation partner is below 500,000. So that's a delegation that I will put in place for the second element of that tender.
Thank you. Excellent. And one or two other questions. In the section category B, again, page 115, it talks about procurement processes to the value of 250,000 that are delegated to and it lists manager, parks and environment. Can officers give me an example of where there'd be procurement for parks and environment to the value of 250,000 in one procurement item?
See if Ms Hawkins can recall one. Otherwise, you're up, Mr Murphy.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think something of that value may be a sort of specific playground project, that type of thing, Councillor Legan, that I've seen come through before that wouldn't be above the 250 mark. Something like that possibly could be an example.
Thank you. That's good. And my final question is, where council views a tender valued at or above 250,000 and later an increase is sought on that tender, does that have to come back to council, and does the tender have to be re-tendered?
Ms Hawkins.
Through the Mayor, where there's a variation and a change to the value, if it's anything $500,000 and above, it will come back to council, or will come to council. So it's not the variation, but it's the total amount. So that, yeah, that's how the variation works.
Thank you. That's fine.
Thank you. And there's no one opposed to that, so that motion is moved. Councillor Legan, seconded Councillor Ree, and I'll put that to the vote. Noting that Councillor Migdale has left the room, so that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We'll go on to item 14, and we'll start with 14.1, the notice of motions for consideration. Councillor Kristovich, your community safety scope.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I've got an alternative recommendation I'd like to go to.
It's your rec.
Which basically says that a report be presented to the Community and Resources Committee, meeting to be held 18th of November 2025, identifying opportunities to broaden the legislative powers of community safety, rangers and community patrol officers that may increase the city's ability to ensure a safer community in the City of Stirling.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Olo. Is anyone opposed? Councillor Legan. Then in that, you'd like to open debate, Councillor Legan? Yeah. Yes, Councillor Kristovich. No, you don't get to. I didn't mean open it. Councillor Kristovich, you can open your debate.
Thank you very much. As we know, and especially through the budget process, we know that, and through community consultation, we know that community safety and our rangers are very highly valued by our community. And it's a resource that is used very effectively together with our local police forces and is doing a huge job to try and make the community safer. Now, you know, there's greater demands out there. There's opportunities to try and review what we're doing, how we're doing it, to see if we can do things differently, to see if our rangers and officers have got the right powers based on legislative changes that may have gone through, to consult with the relevant stakeholders. So this is really about just going back and having a look at what we currently do, how we do it. Is there a better way of doing it? Can we readjust our capacity between our rangers and our community safety people and share responsibilities across those two to try and increase our capacity? So I don't see any issues in terms of having a look at this. I know the community is very keen to see this happen. I know they're very keen to see us provide even more service in this space because they're struggling to get the police out to deal with a lot of issues out there because obviously the police are stretched and they don't have the capacity to deal with the lower level issues that are occurring out there in the community, but our rangers and our community safety staff are able to fill that gap to a certain point, but they only have limited powers in terms of what they can and can't do. So I think it's overdue for us to go back and have a bit of a review to see what we do, how we do it, and whether we can do it better.
Thanks, Councillor Olo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've had always a big concern about the safety of our rangers and our officers that are out on patrol, which I have brought up about a year or two ago. My concern is, yes, we need safety, but not just to the community, but safety to our officers. They're very limited in their protection, and most of the time our officers are patrolling on their own. I have always asked if we can have some type of weapon that they can, I don't mean a gun, I'm talking about, sorry, like a pepper spray or something to protect themselves. Because
Sure, and there's nothing wrong with your debate. I just want to preempt the fact that this is not the motion about it. So I think we've got to be careful going into assumptions of what the report is about and starting to talk about tasers and trudgeons and what have you. It's for a report to come back.
Yeah, fine.
On those items,
I do support Councillor Kristovich's motion, so I will be supporting that and add more to it when we have further debates.
Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to speak against this for the exercise of getting some debate up. So can I ask through you, my first question is, if you look at page 314 and the reworded alt recommendation, it says a report be presented to the Community Resources Committee meeting held on the 18th of November 25, identifying opportunities to broaden the legislative powers. Can officers tell me, under what legislation do our security officers operate? Is it under the Police Act? Is it under the Securities Act? How do they...
Mr Mullins.
What act of legislation do they operate under?
Can you give me the number?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So our city's security, community patrol officers are licensed security officers under the Security and Related Activities Act, which is a piece of state WA legislation.
Yep, thank you. And that I was assuming that was the case. Look, my opposition to this is not because security at the City of Stirling isn't a great model. In fact, we've been told it's one of the best models in Western Australia. And myself, Councillor Perkov, Councillor Franti, and I think one other have been on patrol with our officers. They do an outstanding job. This is a classic example of bracket creep, or even job creep. This is where we're going to look at a report that will tell us what more we can do that should already be being done by West Australian Police and is not being done. And I just looked up the budget for West Australian Police. It is huge. Why is local government thinking about taking on a legislative activity that it has very limited powers in, that then comes back to our budget? If I was going to support this, I'd say, fine, do the report, but tell me the projected costs in the next budgets. Yeah. Because we are doing...
That sounds like support, Councillor Kristovich.
Yeah, exactly. we are doing... It is my concern that we are going to document and then somehow say it's okay to build a model that, in my view, is something we don't want. If you want an example of how bad that model can go to Britain. They've got private security officers that wander major cities in Britain that can issue you with immediate on-the-spot fines that you have no control over. They're not police, they're not community security, they're private operations that have now taken over legislation powers that I don't want us doing. I want our security team to continue doing what they're doing. I'm happy to spend on more cars, on cameras, even for the tech that we've looked to add to the security officers. But if you talk about safety, if we give more legislative powers or seek more legislative powers for our officers, I can tell you one thing they will have: increased risk of injury. Insurance, injury and safety will go through the roof for them because we'll be expecting them to do more. Yep. I don't think this report is a timely report. What I think we actually should be doing is sending back through either our CEO or the Mayor a request to WA Police on how they're going to improve policing and stats in our community. Look at Inglewood. You want an example of how it wasn't handled well? Look at how many times our security staff went to a government-created problem.
Let's keep it on track, Councillor.
Because they were expected to be the security when the police weren't there. This is a costing issue for the government. Look, the report's a nice idea. My great fear with reports is you put something on the table and then people go, well, the report said we could probably do that. I'm saying we shouldn't be doing it. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Proud, then I've got Councillor Ferrandi.
Just a quick question. I'm against this for so many reasons. Death and destruction, etc., and we don't need to take over government jobs. Through you, perhaps to the Manager of Security, this has been explored before. Who was the commissioner that turned it down, that threw it out, basically, when we tried to do exactly the same thing before?
Mr Mullins.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So we investigated additional police or legislative powers as part of the community safety review when I commenced with the Director of Community Development in August 2022. At that time, the research we undertook was an attempt by City of Perth Rangers to obtain police powers from the then Commissioner, which was Chris Dawson, and he outrightly rejected that request or notion of a request. So that was the basis of that information.
Thank you. Councillor Ferranti.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I was actually the first person that went out with the security detail to have a look at what they do. And to be honest, I've got to say, I was pretty scared. I stayed in the car a couple of times. In all honesty, I take my hat off to the team because they are in situations... I did hear you did. Yeah. I've got to say, it was pretty scary. And I fear for them if we put more pressure on them to do that. We had to wait for police a lot of the time on the scarier ones, but then there's ones that we're going to are mental health related and other issues that were starting to get a bit outside of what our ratepayers, although they're scared and need us to be there and protect them, but we've got to also protect our team and people to some of the risk and elements that they do. This is not the first time that this has come to council, and obviously the question just answered a few minutes ago was also, I was around when we did put that forward, and Commissioner killed it off because that's what police's role is, not our security. Our security team's got to assist our ratepayers when required and make them feel safe and checking on things that are related to the city. But when you start to go into a police domain, we don't have A, the infrastructure to support it, and B, the budgets. And what are we going to do? Increase the security fee? No, I don't think we should do that. What we've got is the right mix. If you start to push over to the other side, there's a risk to our team, there's a risk to a lot of things. So I won't be supporting it, sorry.
Thanks. And with that, I'll go to Councillor Christich to close debate.
Thank you very much. As I was listening to the debate, at one stage I thought someone was going to say, let's shut down our security because they're doing the job of the state government. And that's effectively what our security does do. We do a lot of work that the police should be doing. We work with the police, we help the police, we're the backup for the police from time to time in terms of we're looking at the safety environment around.
Councillors, there's quite a few conversations going on.
An accident or an incident. And interestingly enough, as I listened to Councillor Ferranti, again, I think to myself, well, there's another reason we should be reviewing this because maybe they're doing too much. Maybe their powers are too broad. Maybe they are put in danger because if a big, strong lad like Councillor Ferranti is...
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
There's no point of order.
Ah, damn it.
If Councillor Ferranti's too scared to get out of the car and in the situation...
that is a point of order.
Mr Mayor, on that one. There's no... If anyone bothered to go out and check with these guys and see what actually happens,
Councillor
he
Ferranti,
may not even have this.
Let's let it... Councillor Ferranti had a vulnerable moment with us and you shouldn't exploit it. Now continue to play.
Sorry about that. I'll give him some counselling later on in the...
Come on, let's get on and close it.
But no, look. This is not going to change what we do. This is just looking at things. I mean, when people say, "Oh, I don't want a report to come back," you might put other ideas on the table. Well, every single report we do in council...
Councillors, let's let him close.
Every single report we do in council can be knocked back on the same argument. Oh my God, it might create more work. Oh my God, it might identify something we didn't know. Oh my God, it might give us an opportunity to improve or change the way of things that we do. So I'm obviously I know how important our rangers and our security officers are. Just a question to Mr Mullins as well. Do the rangers and the community safety, do they have the same powers, both of those?
You're closing, councillor. You're losing the room and you can't ask questions.
Well, it's my understanding they don't have the same powers, those two groups of individuals.
Councillors, come on, please.
And the question then is, should they have the same powers? Does that help if they've got more staff to do the work that's going on? So it's really about trying to improve what we do, to look after the people that we've got, and it's a review to have a look at that situation. It's not about approving a budget or changing what we currently do.
Councillor, I rarely have to do this. I'm going to move a motion to put this soon. Come on. With that, it is closed debate. Councillors, let's be very clear. It was probably overplayed just then, this by everyone. This is for a report to come, a future report to come on this item, which is the right time for debate, if you wish it to come to that. I understand. It's up to you. I'll put this motion for a report.
Point of clarification, you need a seconder for that. You want to put the motion?
That was closing debate. Councillor, this is, there is a mover and a seconder. It has been debated. It has been over-debated, some
No,
would say.
you put the motion. You needed a seconder.
No, I didn't put any motion. Councillor Kristovich closed.
I heard you.
He put the vote.
No, I understand what you're saying. No, it was a bit light-hearted, Councillor. Let's. Okay, that is. I'm very sorry to inform you, Councillor Kristovich. Your dreams of tasers are over. The motion is lost. Let's get some decorum. We're almost there, and we'll go to item 14.2. Councillor Giudice, can we please just stop the side chatter and let Councillor Giudice put his motion?
Just a report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, up there is the recommendation there for the Mayor to write to the Minister for Transport and Member for Maylands.
Thanks. Councillor Lagan is seconding that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone opposed? Thank God.
I'll just make a note that we... No, just...
Councillor Giudice?
One note, just on the Beaufort Street 40-kilometre speed zone went through consultation. I think it was about 240 people who actually participated in that, and 75% of them rejected, I suppose, a change to that speed limit. So I suppose I'm just articulating that our community members are very concerned about speed in this area, but equally this Pelican Crossing being a significant risk, and hence the reason why I'm putting up this notice of motion.
Thank you. There is no one opposed. You are not. We're not playing games.
No. The reason I'm opposed, not to this, but the Mayor is writing to ministers all the time, right? And these are important issues. And I think that, especially in this particular circumstance, that the Mayor should have a meeting with the Minister, as well as possibly write if he wants to. But
that's not opposed, Councillor. Let's not debate this item. It's bringing an alert. We're happy to take that offline. I'm happy to meet. I'm happy to write.
Yeah, I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that we're moving motions all the time for you to write. Well, eventually writing becomes the same
Councillor.
as doing nothing.
Yes. There's no one opposed to this. Let's put this to the vote. Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Item 14.3, proposed notice motion, Councillor Ree.
Yes, thank you. The alternative to give staff more time, that a report be presented to the Community and Resource Committee meeting to be held on the 19th of August 2025, identifying the proposed timeframe for upgrades to both Doubleview and Ingley bowling clubs to enable consideration within the city's forward capital works program and a long-term financial plan, please.
Councillor Proud seconding that. Is anyone opposed to that one? Councillor Kristovich.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm not fundamentally opposed to the concept of doing this, but what I want to do is this is two bowling clubs that received grants from the state government in terms of election funding. Now, there were, I think, 6 bowling clubs that received funding, and there were about 20 infrastructure projects and 30 community investment ideas that received funding as well.
This is going to take a long time.
The mover need to start, I think?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to get clarification. So
I wanted to do an alt rec, that's all.
Okay, so I think take a seat.
Yep.
We'll take it as opposed. We'll let Councillor reopen debate, and then you can do it then.
Yep.
Plenty of bowling clubs have had absolutely nothing over the years. If there is an election commitment, let's see it come to fruition. I shall be putting up questions about that. We don't know whether these election commitments will go forward or not go forward. I do recall many years ago that the Doubleview Bowling Club was supposed to get some money because they wanted to have a state championships, and it was supported by various local, state and federal members of parliament. When it came to fruition, got nothing. No one around the table voted for it anyway. So, stuff happens. All this is asking for is a consideration of a forward works. There are so many times that the Doubleview Bowling Club, which is, 64 years old, that has tried to get anything out of this council. And it's got very limited over the years. And every time it wants to do something, oh no, we've got amalgamations, don't give you any money. No, the roof fell down, don't give any money. Oh no, it's got asbestos. let's not give you anything because we might demolish the whole lot. It goes on and on and on. You know, the
Point of clarification, the funding is committed. There's no question, the funding is committed for both.
Thank you.
I'm
Yes.
glad you're a parliamentarian and lobbyist.
Well, I
Or
think
whatever, because we know that you don't belong to a political party, so you can't be called that.
Councillor Reid, careful.
Well, I mean, that's no.
Yeah.
Writes it on the bottom of things. I'm not saying a lie, I'm just confirming.
The election commitments are committed, though. It is a clarification. It's not, are we getting the money? There's commitments for these clubs. But continue.
And I did say before, there were commitments and they didn't come to fruition. Also, we don't know with this council and the staff, the community, there are a lot of variables to whether or not anything gets up or doesn't get up. But I am familiar with quite a few bowling clubs that have had money in the past and have been able to do things. If it wasn't for the ratepayers and the residents and the members of the Innaloo Bowling Club, they never would have got their canopy to actually do one of the first ever indoor bowling clubs. Now, and City of Stirling didn't give them anything for that. They just gave them some money towards the lights.
I believe that was an election commitment from the then Lisa
If I
Harvey.
could finish, you two. The City of Stirling didn't give anything apart from the lights, but because it was an election commitment,
400 grand.
by
Councillor Proud, please.
Well, the facts are important.
Councillor Proud, you'll get your turn. Councillor Reid, continue.
if I have to be rudely interrupted again, the amount of money that was given, right, was mirrored to what the community actually raised, which is 400 grand. So that's what they did. Didn't come out of the City of Stirling, but they did save the money to start with. A lot of other clubs have not saved that amount of money to do anything in the City of Stirling. And it's a huge impost. We're lucky now that a lot of the clubs are a third. 1/3 the people, 1/3 the government, and 1/3 the council, which has changed over the years. Some of them are. Some of them are still 2, but some are 3. Things have opened up a lot more. So it's really difficult for some of these clubs when we're going through an area, especially with an infill program, the people have changed, the clientele have changed, what goes on in the suburbs as to trying to get people. Plus going through COVID, going through parking issues, there's lots of reasons why the bowling clubs, soccer clubs, tennis clubs, whatever you like, everything's going up and down, even hotels. We see it every day with restaurants open up.
Keep going, Councillor.
It's very hard to talk when I've got so many people talking right next
Councillors,
to me.
please be a bit quiet over there. Councillor, get back on topic. You're talking about a report coming to council.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm not asking for anything in the world, God forbid to have it on a budget. All I'm asking for is a report to sit there and say, which should be their conditions. There was supposed to be another report done regarding all the bowling clubs within the city. Well, if there isn't or there is, it doesn't matter. This is just asking for something in the Double V ward to be done with the bowling clubs and asking for what's going on. I don't think it's an unreasonable request. Now you can continue to talk.
Councillor Proud. I've got you all.
Thanks for your permission, Mr. Mayor. This is fine. This is great. Those election commitments are solid. Yes, we're having a bowling club workshop. Can't remember what it's called, but it's coming up really soon. And if Mr. Murphy was here, he'd be able to tell us exactly when it is. I think it's in August. Mr. Quirk can let us know.
Mr. Quirk?
It's coming up in August, I think.
We've got a council workshop on the 30th of June, so only a couple of weeks away.
Yep. So this just works into it. I'm looking forward to this. Great.
Councillor Kristovich.
Thank you very much. So the alternative recommendation I was looking to move basically says that a report be presented to the Community and Resources Committee meeting to be held 19th of August, identifying the proposed timeframes for upgrades to all clubs and groups within the city that have recently received state government financial commitments to enable consideration within the city's forward capital works program and long-term financial plan. So basically what I'm saying is that we're not just picking 2 clubs, we're looking at everything. So those clubs are included with everything else that's been made a financial commitment.
So first, let's deal with a couple of things at once. So firstly, Councillor Kristovich is effectively asking for an amendment from just highlighting two to the, there's probably what, 6 to 8 clubs that have received financial commitments in the elections. 32. So 32 of our clubs and groups. I'm impressed you knew that off the top of your head.
6 bowling clubs, but 32 in total.
They're bowling clubs, cricket clubs, tennis clubs, arts clubs. So the first part of that is to test and see if Councillor Ree and Councillor Proud are happy for it to include the other clubs as part of that report.
I'm not happy, but I have no objection to being number 2 because I don't want Doubleview and Innaloo to be lost in everything. Because I do recall not long ago, I think it was the last council meeting, when I think it was Councillor Judici mentioned that could he add his park,
So,
could he add this?
okay,
and
so
you actually said no, that it had nothing to do with the original.
I'm happy. No, I understand.
So I have no problem with it being
I've heard
1
you.
and 2.
I've heard you. Let me get through this. So I'm happy to have number 2 underneath and try to test this with Councillor Christie to see if he's happy. That a further report highlight the other clubs, the other 30.
I think that's not a problem. Remember, the Councillor Kristovich is about election commitments as well. If there is no election commitment with Innaloo and Doubleview, then that gets lost. So by having,
There is an election commitment for those
but
two.
his motion is different. So what I'm saying is that I've got no objection to being number 2 because I think they're slightly different. Because one of them, they're different. One of them goes across all the clubs, one goes across all the city, and then also it's regarding election commitments.
So the next part, so if you're happy for that to be number 2, the next part I will ask Councillor Kristovich if he is happy to change the date on that second one, because there's no way they'll be able to do 30 clubs by the 19th of August.
Yeah, I'm happy with whatever date fits in with the officers.
Mr Mayor, how does the caretaker period fit in with all this?
Yeah, 19th of August is okay. But the but by adding that second one in, I'll get some advice from Mr Quirk.
Through Mr Mayor,
There's a couple of teams.
Yeah, we're still liaising with various state government departments around the exact scope and the expected timing for those election commitments. We don't expect they'll all come in 25, 26. We think they'll come over a number of financial years. So I think if we work towards that August timeframe, we can certainly give some baseline information on the projects, the clubs that will benefit, and whether those programs or works are or aren't in the city's Forward Capital Works program. But I don't think we'll be in a position to identify proposed timeframes at this point.
Okay, well, I think let's leave it at that then, and that just needs a word report put in, that a further report be presented in that second one. I think that keeps the intent of Councillor Rees and then highlights the fact there's lots of clubs. And even if it's a high-level report that just sort of identifies, because there's probably a lack of, for all councillors to see how many of those clubs, etc., received funding during that process. Are you two happy with that? All right, so it's been accepted. Do you want to debate anymore or discuss?
Look, I'm just happy because I was just conscious that all councillors would want to know what's happening in their own wards to do with election commitments and where it sits on the budget and the timeframes. So this was just an opportunity off the back of Councillor Rees' suggestion to include those other ones, which I think is valuable, because otherwise we'd all be moving notices of motion ourselves to ask for our individual clubs.
Okay, Councillor Dudek.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I was just going to hopefully make it quick so we could proceed to debate. For those of you that remember last council meeting, 27th of May, motion moved at the end by Councillor Criado. If you follow the wording is on point 1 here while I read this motion, that a report be presented to the council meeting to be held 1st July 2025, identifying the proposed timeframe for asset upgrades to Sterling Leisure Balga to enable consideration with the city's Forward Capital Works program and long-term financial plan. To borrow a leaf from David Lagan's, Councillor Lagan's book, I might just ask a question that I already know the answer to. Mr. Mayor, do you know how many councillors voted against that one?
No.
No, it was unanimous. I don't see an issue with this one. I think we should put it, and you know, getting a report back on these, I think is important. And sometimes I wonder if Councillor Ree changed her name and wore a disguise, we might have an easier time getting through this.
I would suggest that so far there's no one actually opposed to it, Councillor Dudak, and it was a fair question. They're very different items. Just careful, I think, with that stuff. I've got Deputy Mayor. You put your hand up. You waved at me. You don't have to.
I did have a question, but it's taken a long while, and I think the question is since gone. But I will ask through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. As far as I'm aware, so funds that have been campaign commitments are being progressed through administration. It's not like they're sitting there doing nothing. I'm aware of what is happening in our ward, in the Lawley ward, and I would have assumed that would be the case in all other, for all other bowling clubs and other clubs that have commitments put to them. Can I just get confirmation through you, please?
Yeah, that would be correct. I would say that there's a lot more complex than that. There'll be several of those commitments that will be delivered maybe directly to clubs and groups by the members. There's others that are fairly straightforward and might form part of the current City's Capital Works program. And there are some that don't form part of the current City Capital's Works program, and probably even the clubs don't really understand what the funding will be entirely used for yet. So there's some that need a lot more work and will take a lot longer, where there's others that are probably further progressed.
So then I would ask the question, is this about ensuring that funds are assigned to specific clubs in one ward to ensure that whatever top-up may be required is addressed over the other clubs? Because obviously when one receives funding of any source, it doesn't include the entire redevelopment, and there's always a particular amount of money that is, well, usually a particular amount of money that the city then has to find to progress these upgrades. Would that be correct?
I would envisage that the fact that it's a report coming will start to highlight some of those concerns. Some of these, as I said, will be straightforward, and it may well be that for example, to pick the two initial clubs, perhaps the Double View Bowling Club is a well-known plan for what the future is, that the club has some understanding, has been working with officers, and we may need to contribute, so understanding what that contribution is and what time frame. And others might be a lot more complicated, like the Innaloo Bowling Club, that may end up including other clubs on that reserve or other things that may need a much bigger discussion and a longer time frame.
Okay, so I guess what I feel would be the highest and best outcome in this instance, and I'm not against a report for two particular clubs, but of course, as 15 of us together, we represent the entirety of the city, 100 square kilometres, as you rightly said earlier this evening. And I'm just wondering if there couldn't be a document placed on the intranet that would just cover off where we're at, what the financial commitment was and where we're at, the stage. And that way, it's a snapshot for councillors.
That's effectively what's been called for.
Okay. For all of them, okay.
Yep.
So I don't see that we need anything further to that.
Anyone else who put their hand up and forgot? Councillor Ree, would you like to talk further and close? I don't think that was directed at you. I think that's quite a normal reaction from Councillor Perkoff.
I know.
So,
It wasn't. Mr. Mayor, it wasn't.
No, I'm
just feeling warm.
Well, I couldn't dare comment. Anyway, I just think that it's there was a stage where we actually did used to rotate in all the clubs and to make sure that every 4 or 5 years everyone's upgraded blah, blah, blah to a standard. Then it became more towards the elections. So we have to find money if they get an election commitment. And that depends on the area as well.
But
So
I do want to clarify,
variables
nothing's
in here.
changed.
No, if I could finish. There's a lot of variables in this, but we don't know what parliamentarians or candidates will offer or ask for. And that's across the city. Some put more money into something or not another. That's politics. But we're not here for the politics. We're supposed to be here for the community. So whilst I think that number 2 is a good thing, it's sort of divorcing my original motion, as Counter made the original comment. But I do believe that number 2 is necessary. But I think with what's been happening with number 1, it's really important that we start looking at some of these clubs that because they don't complain or because they're not in an area that's political, they don't tend to get a lot of funding. So, and they go about doing the things that they have to do. But I just feel that, you know, it's important to put it on the record again. And I think it's important as well to sit there and find out with the commitments. I believe that some parliamentarians that actually lost, that Labor parliamentarians that lost, that the government has given their commitment, underwriting, that they will still commit whatever they promised. But we don't know that. They've just said that. They could change it. The iron ore prices could go nowhere. They've got no money for concrete and everything will change. But the thing is, we still have to budget. And if we're trying to do a financial plan, a business plan for 4 or 5 years, it makes it very, very difficult when we actually have these political commitments come in and then they say, well, you know, like we're going to give you $1 million for this tennis club, but we really need $1 million for this bowling club. That's where we wanted to put the money as a group, when we were caring about as a group all the council across the wards, across the city. But then it changes because that's where we got the money. And sometimes I have a problem with that we should have to be involved in the politics of doing that to match whatever funds they give. But that's the realm we're in. So as long as it's in black and white and people know what's going on, and yes, I think the Councillor Midgill's comments about knowing what is actually really committed, and I think Mr. Quirk's comment is also valid. We don't really know. We really don't know. They're working with who said what, but what actually comes in, they've said that they're going to give this amount of money, but when it gets to the parliamentary floor, their caucus might turn around and say no. People might say no. So we've got to stay with what we've got. So it would be nice for people to support this, and as Councillor Dudak said, Belga went through in 5 seconds. Thank you.
Can I just ask also, before we put this to the vote, are those words other than double view and interlude needed to be in there? I think it's self-explanatory. I think when you read them together, it probably just doesn't need those extra words. Yeah.
Well, they're 2 different things.
Yeah.
One is about planning, the other one's about election commitments. So those should be separate.
Yeah, but they're very linked with that. I'm happy to put that. I'll put that to the vote. Move Councillor Rees, second to Councillor Proud. Councillor Migdale, Councillor Perkoff. Yeah, the digital is saying you didn't. Now you have. Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Item 15, notice of motion for consideration at the next meeting. Are there any notice of motions you wish to raise? Councillor Ree.
Yes, thank you. I don't know. Is it there? No? Yes? Oh, yes. That a report be presented to the Community and Resource meeting to be held the 1st of July on the cost, benefits and risk of installing LifeVac airway clearance devices within the City of Stirling community facilities, and include the recommendation for potential implementation by August 2025, and the reasons for the motion are there.
Thank you. Look, we'll leave it tonight, but we'll probably just notify you they're already installing them. So
I know, but they're not everywhere apparently.
okay. Anyway,
that's politics. And my second one, that the footpath around Jackadder Lake Reserve and Woodlands be established to ensure it's continuous around the reserve without going through the new playground. In the past, around Jackadder Lake, the footpath went around, but now that we've put fences around the playground, people have to try to get out of wheelchairs, try to get out of things, and they actually have to go through the playground on the footpath, and dogs aren't allowed in the playground, so people with dogs now have to walk around. So it's just, it was discussed at budget a while ago, but nothing's happened when they did the fence.
That's right.
I think
the
that
motion's
makes
up.
sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
And got Councillor Thornton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a notice of motion that is coming before the SAT, so we thought, being a key stakeholder and our community being grossly affected by this issue, we should make a submission. That the council notes the city's officers will make a submission to the State Administrative Tribunal in relation to the current matter under appeal for the Wholesome Concrete Batching Plant. The submission is to reinforce the city's concerns that the proposed relocation may have on achieving the vision for the area to become a high-density, mixed-use precinct due to the potential health, amenity, transport impacts from the concrete batching plant being located in Osborne Park. Also, that the Chief Executive Officer provides a copy of this submission outlined in one to all elected members for their information once finalised.
Thank you. Councillor Kristovich.
Thank you very much. I've got up on the board there. So it reads that the city officers investigate and prepare a report outlining options which will allow for slightly different outcomes for local centres, acknowledging their varied role and function in the centre's hierarchy.
Oh, if only we had a local planning scheme, Councillor. Anyway, okay. Okay. Yes. You've given the director a chuckle. Are there any other notice of motions for consideration? No. Then we'll move on to 17. I have nil for new business. 18 matters behind closed doors. There are, or is one for us to consider, so we'll ask someone to move. Councillor Perk, I've moved that we go behind closed doors, and Councillor Proud has seconded. A show of hands to move behind closed doors. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Goodbye to William.